This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto fell in love with Erza. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
Laxus snarled, "Tisk. Evergreen should have just finished Erza off instead of playing with her," while continuing to glare at the name of the victor who had vanquished Bixlow appearing on the enchantment. With a darkened growl and narrowed eyes, he said, "Those fools now probably think my defeat is certain now that the deserter has returned." He was about to confront the intruder when he heard footsteps coming from the cathedral's entrance, but Fried was coming toward him with a neutral expression on his face. Fried eyed his leader and said, "Erza's just too strong for Evergreen to begin with." He then turned to face the cage where Kushina was being held and said, "And considering you kidnapped her child, there's nothing worse than a mother's wrath when the child is involved." He then turned back to Laxus, but his attention was more focused on the name behind Laxus. "You should have sent myself or Bixlow to battle her, but unfortunately, Bixlow was also defeated by this unknown mage." The lightning mage passively demanded, "What are you doing here, Fried?" and was met with a raised eyebrow. "The game is over, Laxus," said the enchanter. "With majority of the hostages freed, the master will never give in." Fried's eyes widened as he saw a slight flinch in Laxus's posture, and he was able to cover his face as a lightning bolt struck the wall next to him. Laxus remained silent and gazed at his subordinate with an emotionless face. "I don't need weaklings in my fairy tale," said Laxus icily as he turned back to face his throne. "If you want to chicken out now, then get lost." Fried looked at his leader and found his voice. The swordsman asked uncertainly, "What do you plan on doing?" But Laxus turned back to him with a mad smile. The response, "I'm going to activate the Hall of Thunder," caused Fried's eyes to enlarge in surprise. The Hall of Thunder. You would actually go that far, he thought. What about Erza and this Uzumaki? He turned to face the caged Kushina, who retreated into a corner of her cage after becoming alarmed at his intense gaze. "As for Erza and Uzumaki, I have something special planned for them that'll break their spirits," he said, adding, "The old man's resting his hopes on Mistgun along with that red-haired skank and her foolish lover. I'll deal with Mistgun myself." Suddenly, Fried experienced a chilling chill. Fried asked, "What are your intentions for that girl?" But Laxus gave him a menacing glare. Laxus responded coldly, "That is none of your concern. What should you be concerned with is making sure that the filth that is fairy tale be eradicated," which caused Fried to gasp in surprise. When he fired another lightning bolt next to him, Laxus suddenly interrupted, saying, "Kill them. We may be fighting them right now, but they're still mem. This is a purge. It isn't over until one side is obliterated completely," yelled Laxus as lightning danced around him, frightening Kushina even more. "Did you not hear my orders?" Unsure of what to do, Fried just stared at his leader until he relaxed. Laxus closed his eyes and inhaled deeply before opening them again while maintaining an expression devoid of emotion. Before turning and leaving the cathedral, Fried declared, "I will complete my mission. I will be aiming to kill. Don't get cold feet now. Now that we have come this far, I fear there's no turning back. I will follow you down this path, even if it leads to hell." Laxus watched his most powerful member leave with a gloomy laugh. Laxus whispered, "Very good, Fried the Dark. It's time you showed them your real power," as he made his way to the enchantment. Back on the square, Naruto, accompanied by a now awake and gaunt Jet and Droy, who had been healed by Wendy, approached the wall where he had left the wounded Azlik shortly after Bixlow had passed out. "Since the two of you had a stunned expression on their faces and their mouths were practically hitting the floor," the blonde said humorously, "glad to see the two of you are fine." "Unbelievably," Droy exclaimed, "Yo! You're back? You're really back," Jet, however, abruptly punched Naruto in the jaw after emerging from his daze. The blonde was shocked by the action, but it didn't have a big impact on her. "How dare you not keep in contact after you left us? Do you know how difficult it was for us, for Erza, not knowing if you were even alive?" yelled the speed user, "You selfish bastard." Wendy and Carla remained silent in the background as Naruto lowered his gaze to the ground. "Do you have any idea the anguish Erza felt after your departure? Especially after Kushina was born, since she didn't know if you were going to even come back at all and having the fear of one day telling her that her father left them to die fighting some war. Do you? 1. After his tirade, Jet was huffing to catch his breath while he waited for the blonde to respond. "Jet. You along with everyone else back at the guild have the right to be mad. Even spiteful towards me for the decision I took 3 years ago, replied the blonde as he gazed at Jet. You're right, it was selfish of me leaving. A decision I have regretted for the last 3 years, but it was my duty to stop him as the last remaining soldier of my village. Then he looked at his fellow guild member. However, if you believe that it didn't affect me being away from Erza, then you're mistaken. In an attempt to defuse the conflict, Droy intervened right away. At the moment, he didn't want his childhood friend to resemble Bixlow exactly. As he shoved Jet away from Naruto, Droy said, Jet, calm down. We should be fighting Laxus right now, not each other. Besides, this is really between him and Erza, so we can't get involved. After catching his breath, Jet glanced at his friend and then back at the blonde. He inhaled deeply to relax, then turned to face Naruto. When Jet held out his hand, Naruto shook it in recognition. He's right, Laxus and his group are our objectives and I'm sorry for shouting at you. I was out of line, Jet said. It's all right, as I said, you and everyone else have a right to be angry at me, but I will face them once I deal with Laxus, replied the brunette. Freed's enchantments, however, changed appearance before he could say anything more, revealing Laxus's colors, a skull with a lightning bolt on the right side. Returning to the guild, Makarov and the others were taken aback by the abrupt shift, but Laxus's declaration caught them off guard. Can you hear me, old man? Fairy tale? The sound of that man's voice made Natsu grit his teeth in anger. Laxus. Since we lost one of our rules, I'm going to instate a new one, so as to keep this battle of fairy tale moving. I've activated the Hall of Thunder. The master gasped, the Hall of Thunder, as he started to perspire from the extreme danger Laxus had brought. Only 1 hour and 10 minutes remain. Come and find me if you fools believe you can defeat me. Dark chuckle. Or you can simply play nice and retire. Master, oh, and before I forget, Uzumaki. You better play by the rules as well while your brat is my guest, otherwise, she's going to be afraid of lightning for the rest of her life. Ha 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 ha. As their enchantments vanished, the last sound they heard was his laughter. The angry master roared, leave Kushina and the citizens out of this LAXUS. But then abruptly clenched his chest above his heart with his hand, causing everyone around him to become alarmed as they watched him fall to his knees. Old man. Master. Everyone exclaimed. As she hurried back inside to retrieve the master's medication, Mirajane exclaimed, he needs his medicine. As she and Levi knelt next to the master, Briska exclaimed anxiously, at a time like this. Levi begged, Master, get a hold of yourself, please. Then Mirajane returned with the medicine, but her worried expression made everyone uneasy. Everyone, look outside, back with the others, including Naruto. They had listened to the message and, like everyone else at the guild, were terrified by the lightning's mage announcement. Droy, like everyone else, saw the floating lacrimas encircling the town and exclaimed, has Laxus completely lost his mind? I can sense the immense power those lacrimas possess, Carla muttered. Aslik summed up, and if they were to go off, then the town will be engulfed in a storm of lightning strikes, but they turned to see Naruto walking away from them when they heard footsteps retreating. Naruto-san. Where are you heading? Wendy yelled as she started to follow him, but she abruptly stopped when she noticed Naruto halting. She then made quick hand gestures and slammed a hand down on the ground. Everyone who wasn't prepared coughed violently as they inhaled a lot of smoke, and when the smoke started to clear, they all opened their eyes because they could control their coughing fit, but they were all shocked to see a huge toad with an eye patch covering the scar on its right side. The toad was almost as tall as Naruto, if not slightly taller, and he was wearing a dark vest with the white kanji for iron on his back. It also had a huge hammer that appeared to be used for making weapons, too. Well. Therefore, if you are standing in front of me and calling me no less, I suppose the rumors that you are dead are untrue, the toad said in a deep voice. The blonde's emotionless response, that they are Gamatetsu, sent chills down their spines. So why are you calling me a brat? The war is over, and I don't see a reason for you to need your weapons, the toad asked, gazing at the blonde with one eye. When the blonde said, this is personal, Gamatetsu narrowed his eyes and stared into his eyes for a few minutes before making a rough noise and bringing his hammer down, which caused a tiny cloud of smoke to appear before revealing a huge chest. As he started to unzip his vest, Naruto silently walked up to the chest and opened it, reaching for its contents. Wendy, Carla, Azlik, Jet, and Droy were curious about what was inside the chest, but they had a pretty good idea after hearing the toad say something about weapons, so when they saw the blonde reach for whatever it held, they were shocked to see that Naruto had started to remove his vest, pulling out a black armor vest with belt, like straps on the sides and on the chest area. 3. After the blonde had removed his current upper garments, Azlik, Jet, and Droy could only grimace at the many scars on his body, the most noticeable of which was a fist-sized scar that appeared to be just above his heart. The blonde reached inside the chest again and took out a pair of black forearm protectors with a golden band around the wrist area. 3. With a matching colored belt that held pouches on either side, while one side held an extra pouch on the right side and strapped them on. Naruto just ignored the looks he received from his guild members as he put on the vest and tightened the straps. "You should be lucky that your old man gave me a copy of the blueprints for the Haraishin Kanais after he completed the jutsu so I could replicate them," said the weapon maker. "They were a bit tricky to make due to the seals, but I managed to make a good amount, so I modified the pouches by adding small seals on both of them to make the space within even larger." "What is the number of Haraishin Kanais that we are discussing?" As he eyed a sheathed sword at the bottom of the chest, the blonde asked. Gametetsu shocked the eavesdroppers by responding, "Enough for you to destroy an entire platoon by yourself." However, the smith caught Naruto reaching for the sword and removing it from its sheath, only to find a dull blade. The blonde then looked at him with a suspicious expression that said, "I finished that sword a while back, but didn't finish it in time for you to use it in your fight against Madara, so I placed it in the chest," and he watched as the blonde carefully examined the blade before revealing that it was made of the same material as his hammer. "It is lightweight and nearly indestructible, which may not seem like much to a typical weapon user, but it is very dangerous in the hands of a wind user. You can make this sword sharper than any other sword in the world by incorporating your wind chakra into it." Suddenly, they heard something breaking, and when they looked up, they saw that one of the lacrimas had been destroyed, but if they looked closely enough, they could also see magic energy floating in midair before it reformed into a thunderbolt and stroked toward the guild. And that one was on its way to the guild. A distressed Jet cried out, which made Droy and Azlik anxious as well, thinking that the bolt might strike a terrified Levi or Briska. The blonde swiftly turned to face his trembling guildmates after sheathing the sword. Before he turned to face Wendy, the blonde gave the order, "I want the three of you to head back to the guild. Help any guild members you find along the way. Wendy, I apologize for bringing you into this civil war, but I want you and Carla to accompany them and heal anyone they come across," he said. "And what will you be doing?" Carla asked, trying to hide her anxiety at the circumstance. Before turning to face Carla, the blonde merely fastened his sword to his waist. The blonde said sharply, "I'm going to deal with Laxus myself," and then he reached into his second pouch on the right and took out a marked tag. Squatting on one knee, he gave the tag to the Exceed, saying, "Listen carefully, once you reach the guild, place this tag on the enchantment, it'll self-activate and destroy the barrier." "How can Freed's enchanted wall be broken by a piece of paper?" Droy exclaimed, but the blonde shot him a glare. "Codes must be concealed within the enchantment for it to function. With this seal, it'll easily crack all those codes and break the wall, allowing everyone trapped within the guild to enter the battle," Naruto explained as he stood up and then glared at the three of them. "I'm leaving Wendy in the care of the three of you," he said, turning back to Wendy, his eyes softening as he saw how anxious and afraid she was. "Don't worry, Wendy. Chan, this will all be over soon, I promise," he said, placing his hand on top of her head and grinning warmly. Wendy attempted to display bravery by simply nodding her head. "Be careful, Naruto.ni.san." Naruto nodded his head and observed Wendy and Carla, as well as his fellow guild members, making their way to the guild. Jet, on the other hand, abruptly turned back after a few steps and gazed straight at the blonde. "Naruto, make sure Laxus has a memorable beating," Jet yelled. As he watched the speed user turn around to catch up with the others, Naruto stood there expressionless until a tiny smile appeared on his lips and he gave Jet the thumbs up. Gametetsu watched as Naruto approached Bixlo slowly, reached down for his neck with his left hand, and effortlessly raised him up, his feet angled off the ground as Naruto glared at him. Once they were out of sight, Naruto's eyes turned cold and ruthless as he turned his sights towards Bixlo. "Where is my daughter, and may I ask you again?" Coldly, the blonde demanded. The toadsmith thought, So Fukasaku. Sama wasn't pulling my leg when he told me of the Gaki having a kid. Bixlow attempted to laugh but just choked. You believe? You're tough? You may, the mage wheezed. Defeated me. However, Laxus will slaughter you. Heh heh heh. The blonde simply narrowed his eyes and gave the mage a menacing glare. The blonde's murderous intent rose as Naruto snarled, for his own sake, he better be as strong as you say he is, and started to squeeze Bixlow's neck, choking the mage from the lack of air. Because if he isn't, he better start praying to the gods for mercy, because when I find him, he shall receive none from me. Following that last statement, Naruto cocked his right hand and punched him in the stomach with such force that Bixlow spit out blood and lost consciousness, limping in midair as Naruto simply held him by the neck. The sound of bones breaking further could be heard as a result of the blow. Gametetsu suppressed a shiver at the aggressiveness of the blonde, thinking, I haven't seen that much rage in him since he fought Pain. Whoever this Laxus person is, he is one dead man, because he is about to find out why Naruto is known as the demon of the fallen leaf. When Naruto noticed the mage was unconscious, he threw Bixlow into the air toward the guild without saying a word. Gametetsu said, so you're going to partake in this little civil war, as he observed the blonde leaving once the down mage had vanished from view. Yes. Why? When the Toad Smith asked this question, Naruto paused and turned slightly to look at him. Gametetsu was shocked when Naruto said, because that bastard has my daughter hostage, his eyes softening. I've already lost my loved ones in Konoha and I wasn't able to do a damn thing about it, he said, but they quickly regained their fire. I would not allow my family to suffer if I have anything to say about it. With a laugh, Gametetsu watched as Naruto leapt to the closest rooftop and ran in an erratic direction before vanishing in a cloud of smoke and returning to the Summon Realm. Returning to Fairy Tail after stabilizing the Master's sudden attack, he was laid to rest next to Briska, who was struck by the lightning bolt after destroying it, in the guild's medical room. Mira Jane sat on the chair next to the Master, worried about his health because she knew how serious his condition was and that it could be disastrous given his age. Her thoughts then turned to Kushina, and she felt helpless as she brought her hands to her head with her eyes closed, as if shielding herself. The thought of Erza's daughter being harmed by Laxus infuriated her. She no longer had the will to fight after the death of her sister, Lisana, but she was here permitting another death. We battle, Mira. We continue to fight. The words Naruto had said to Mira after he found out about her sister's death and her refusal to fight suddenly reverberated in her eyes as she opened them in shock. Never give up on defending our loved ones and ensuring that no one else is ever taken from us. The bartender whispered, Naruto.kun, as she gazed out the window with teary eyes and a smile on her face. You're right, we have to continue fighting, she said. Thank you. Mira Jane rose from her chair and slipped out of the medic bay, entering a scene where Levi was using her magical glasses to speed up reading in order to figure out the code to break Freed's enchantment, and Kana and Juvia were about to depart to assist the others in fighting Laxus. Hold on. The bartender yelled, and the others turned to stare at her anxiously. Has the master experienced any problems? Asked Lucy, and when she shook her head, everyone sighed with relief. Mira Jane shocked those who knew why she had stopped fighting and taking missions by saying, No, I want to accompany you too, I want to fight. I know I haven't taken any missions since that incident, but I cannot stand here and watch with the possibility that the same tragedy repeat itself with Kushina, she said. Kana, Natsu, and Levi noticed that their friend had changed, but they would have to figure it out later because right now, someone needed a serious fairy tale style ass kick. Being the oldest in their group, Kana took charge and said, Okay, then, Levi, keep trying to break the enchantment while Juvia, Mira Jane, and I look for Laxus. She then turned to face the two dragon slayers and said, After Levi manages to dispel the enchantment, catch up with us. When we face Laxus, we will require all the assistance we can obtain. How about Naruto, though? Levi sat up on her knees and asked, he might already be looking for Laxus. We will support Naruto this time and fight with him, Kana said, turning to face Juvia and Mira Jane. We don't know how strong Naruto has become or if he has suffered any injuries from his fight with Bixlow. Let's go. After nodding, the girls started to go down the stairs, but they abruptly stopped when they heard someone whistling. From where is it coming? As soon as Natsu heard the sound, he asked. Gadgil was searching for the source, and as he looked up and saw a tiny black dot descending upon them, he immediately realized that it wasn't coming from the sides but rather from above. Coming! The Iron Dragon Slayer yelled, and the girls leapt aside in time to see the approaching object smash into the stairs, forming a large dust cloud of rubble. Gadgil was the first to break out of his daze, and everyone waited with their guard up as they watched the dust start to clear and slowly approached whoever had crashed, only to gasp in shock to discover an unconscious Bixlow, bloodied and beaten. And the Iron Dragon Slayer said, "I don't know whether to feel joy or pity," which confused those around him. "What's the reason behind that?" She turned to Levi and asked him. "I'm glad that Naruto is on our side because it appears that he is furious," without averting his eyes from Bixlow's fallen form. Gadgil replied, "Very pissed. Or pity, because once he faces that lightning jackass, there's no doubt that Laxus is going to get a beating far worse than him," he concluded, pointing to Bixlow. For a few more seconds, Kana just kept staring at Bixlow before shaking her head and telling the other two mages to follow her. The three of them hurried out of the guild to find Laxus, leaving Natsu and Gadgil to look after Bixlow as they carried him to the guild's med bay while Levi carried on with her quest to break the enchantment. The Iron Dragon Slayer muttered, "I still say we should have let that jackass lick his own wounds," as he left the room, Natsu trailing behind him. Ignil's son argued, "Enemy or not, we do not abandon a guildmate," while glaring at his Dragon Slayer brother. Gadgil continued to walk toward Levi without saying anything, but he abruptly stopped when he smelled something and started sniffing around. "What the devil? Did you fart or what?" was Natsu's astute comment, but Gadgil's scowl silenced it. "You fool! You smell it too, don't you?" he yelled, causing Natsu to blink owlishly before he noticed the familiar scent and started sniffing the air around him. "What's happening?" Lucy asked as she exited the building, Happy flying next to her. Lucis and Happy's eyes widened as Gadgil muttered, "Another Dragon Slayer is approaching," and turned to face the guild's stairway. The sound of running footsteps, which grew louder as it got closer, was heard by the three of them. As they reached the last step, Jet, Droid, and Aslik were seen, along with a 12-year-old boy with long blue hair and a white flying cat. "Jet! Droid!" Levi exclaimed joyfully as she came out to welcome the two newcomers. "Levi! You're no longer afraid," as they went to give her a hug, the two fools yelled. Aslik went to Natsu and Lucy after noticing that Levi was no longer under Evergreen's influence. "Where is Briska?" Natsu. Lucy moved toward the gun mage slowly. When Lucy saw the emotions in his eyes, she felt awful. "Briska is in the med bay. She got struck by lightning after she destroyed one of the lacrimas," she replied. "Will you bring me to see her?" Lucy nodded in response to Azilak's humble question and escorted him inside the structure. "However, how did you all manage to dispel Evergreen's charm?" Jet asked, glancing at Gadgil, who crossed his arms and snorted, and Natsu. "Erza fought Evergreen and defeated her after the idiot." "Hey!" Gadgil replied, used his flames to break the weakened spell on her, aiming at the young Dragon Slayer who attempted to enter the guild but was prevented by the enchantment. "You won't be able to go through, the idiot, and I couldn't get out either." Carla then flew to the center of the entrance after removing the tag Naruto had given her. She merely said, "Stand back," as she attached the enchantment's tag. Everyone started to back off when they noticed that the paper tag's markings were glowing, which made the enchantment glow as well. The marking then started to spread throughout the enchantment until tiny cracks appeared everywhere, and then the enchantment abruptly broke as though it were made of glass. Natsu extended his hand toward the guild's entrance in search of an invisible wall, but when he found nothing, his and everyone else's eyes widened. "The magic has vanished," gaped joyful Natsu, and Levi gave him wide-eyed looks as Droy remarked, "I guess Naruto wasn't kidding when he said that piece of paper would break Freed's enchantment." "You saw Naruto? Where is he?" yelled the Fire Dragon Slayer. "Has he located Laxus yet? What is his strength?" Knowing why he had asked the question in the first place, everyone simply broke out in a cold sweat at his final query. "Yeah, we saw him," Jet said, pointing to Wendy and Carla. "We met them and got that paper tag because we woke up from unconsciousness immediately after Naruto defeated Bixlow." "Who are they?" Levi inquired. "I'm Wendy, and this is Carla," the timid Sky Dragon said, pointing to the woman standing next to her with her arms folded. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said. Are you not the Sky Dragon Slayer? She and everyone else's eyes widened as Gadgil eyed her and asked. What do you think if she is? Carla demanded. Another Slayer of Dragons. Awesome. With great excitement, Natsu pumped his fist into the air, causing Carla's and Wendy's eyes to enlarge. Where's the master, Levi? When he realized he was nowhere to be seen, Droy asked, making her look downcast. The master had a sudden attack from his illness, aggravating it when Laxus had announced that he had activated the Hall of Thunder, and judging by how much pain the master was suffering, it looks very serious, replied Levi, shocking both of her teammates. Wendy walked slowly over to Levi. Wendy timidly muttered, I can help, attracting everyone's attention. You're correct. Naruto said you had healing abilities, maybe she can help, said Jet, snapping his fingers. Wendy, can you cure him? Hopefully asked Levi. Wendy responded, I will do my best, as Happy ushered her inside. But Jet, the master could be dying right now, we don't know if she can really heal him, said Droy. She can heal him. Carla was turned toward by Team Shadow Gear. How do you know she's capable of healing the master? Queried Jet. Carla simply squinted at the speed user. Everyone gasped in surprise as she responded, because if it weren't for Wendy, Naruto wouldn't be alive right now. He was barely alive when we found him. His entire body was nearly shattered. He would have died if we had discovered him a minute later, but Wendy was able to treat his injuries, even though he spent 5 months in a coma. What? It has been 5 months since he returned. Natsu yelled, but Gadgil struck him in the head. Salamander, stop yelling so loudly. Levi scowled as Carla stated, although, that's not what's important at the moment, obviously ignoring Natsu's outburst. So what is it? That moron just emerged from a coma and is about to engage in combat that will undoubtedly test his mettle. There is a possibility that his stab wounds could reopen, even though the majority of them have fully healed. Stabbing wounds? Levi stammered in horror as her face lost some of its color. After Wendy cleaned the stab wounds, Carla softly recalled, 7 of them, all of them on his upper body and close to his major organs, adding, they haven't completely healed and if he pushes himself, they may re-open. When they heard this news, everyone fell silent. For once, Natsu turned to face the guild's steps without saying anything. Natsu? Levi said. The salamander declared solemnly, I'm going to go find Laxus and beat him, and then he sprinted off to find Laxus. Gadgil gave a little snort and walked away in a different direction. In the meantime, Naruto continued to hop from building to building in an attempt to detect any signs of Laxus, but he was unable to do so. Even in Sage mode, I can't seem to find him, unless he managed to completely hide his presence, the blonde whispered as he leapt onto the next building. Where the hell could he be hiding? The Kyuubi interrupted Naruto's thoughts by saying, Brat, you do know there's a chance your wounds made by Madara may re-open again if you fight. The blonde mentally responded, I know and I don't care, as he leapt atop another building and then stopped as he touched one of his abdominal stab wounds. Rescuing Kushina is my only concern right now, he said. You normally would have taken care of them by now, but I'm wondering why they haven't fully healed yet. Just now, Naruto heard the 9 tails growling. That man's chakra is like poison and when he stabbed you, he laced his weapon with a great amount of chakra. That's why you fell into a coma and it took a good amount of time to heal, said the Kyuubi. So, some of his chakra is still there? The blonde inquired. No, the chakra has been purged, but the damage done was severe, he responded. He sensed a sudden surge of energy, magic and quickly entered his sage mode, pinpointing the precise location of the fight. 3 people fighting in a 2-on-1 duel, with the single person easily outpowering the 2. Just as Naruto was about to ask him more questions. Your next casualty? The 9 tails enthusiastically asked. Yes, Naruto muttered as he started to glow yellow and vanished in a flash of yellow light. 4. When Gray woke up from his defeat by Bixlow, he went to look for any other fairy tale mages in the town and discovered Elfman unconscious. After waking the sleeping giant, Gray assisted him in walking around the town because they had decided to look for Laxus themselves and put an end to this fight, but they were caught off guard when they crossed roads with Freed. Realizing they had no choice but to fight, the 2 attacked him, only to be slashed with the sword, with enchantment markings appearing on their chests. A piece once defeated is thereafter forbidden from returning to the game, Freed said sternly. Those who break this rule shall be subjected to a fate worse than death. His right eye's iris suddenly glowed white and went completely black. Yami no creature. Pain. What the devil? Gray remarked as his body started to tremble. Elfman snarled, my body feels strange, as his body started to tremble. Suddenly, as though under extreme torture, the two of them yelled. Freed then used his sword to write once more. Yami no creature. Fear. They both screamed louder than before, but the dark mage wasn't done yet, as he enchanted for pain and struggle. Freed repeatedly slashed their bodies for pain, causing both of them to feel to their knees, with Gray remaining conscious and continuing to remain on his knees while he glared at the dark mage with hatred as he prepared to deliver the final blow. Yami no creature. Annihilation. As he waited for the sword to finish him, Gray watched as Freed lowered his sword and the ice maker closed his eyes. However, he failed to notice a yellow flash that appeared in front of him, and the sounds of swords clashing reverberated throughout the bridge. When he heard Freed's sword being stopped, Gray opened his eyes slowly to see that someone in a black vest was standing in front of him, blocking Freed with his own sword. His eyes widened as he noticed that the gusts created by the sword clash were moving the blonde spiked hair. You won't be killing anyone, Naruto said icily as he pushed Freed away with his strength. This gave Naruto enough time to concentrate his chakra into his blade, which made the sword glow as the wind started to circle it. Freed, he quickly created a barrier with his magic as he saw the impending attack. Yami no creature. Shield. Freed coughed as he stood on guard in case Naruto went for the attack within the debris, but was taken aback to find the blonde standing passively and glaring at him. The blonde swung his sword, causing an invisible barrier to appear in front of him. The blade made a loud whistling sound as it came down towards its target, creating a dust cloud upon impact with the barrier. The sound of rocks collapsing stopped Freed in his tracks as he was about to charge for the attack, thinking his opponent was seriously underestimating him. The dark mage looked over his shoulder and shook, realizing that the majority of the bridge had been destroyed, with the exception of the section where he cast his carrier. Naruto. Took you long enough to come back, Gray muttered incredulously before he scoffed and turned to face the blonde with a pained smile. The blonde's astute response was, sorry, I got lost on the road of life on my way here, as he turned slightly and gave the ice maker a smile of his own. Then, with his icy blue eyes replacing all humor, he aimed back at the dark mage, saying, as for you, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked your buddy. Where is Laxus keeping Kushina? With a steely glare, the blonde demanded. Freed's eyes were filled with a mixture of disbelief and fear as he turned to face the blonde, but they quickly changed to a glare as he swiftly used his sword to write some enchantments that caused them to materialize in front of Naruto. Yami no creature. Containment. As it shot upward, a circle started to glow golden around the blonde, completely enclosing him as he gazed at the enchantment on display before him. Naruto. Gray yelled as he attempted to stand up to assist him, but his wounds prevented him from doing so, and he collapsed to the ground. Freed calmly stated, you won't be able to break out of this, no matter how strong you are, but he did nothing but watch as the blonde slashed his hand, which was now marked with glowing marks, on top of the enchantment, made some hand signals, and stabbed his sword into the ground. When Naruto's seal was placed, it activated instantly, causing Freed's enchantments to glow as well. This revealed the cylindrical containment that encircled the blonde until the seal shattered the enchantment and glowed brighter, leaving the dark mage staring in disbelief. Not possible. Freed gasped. As the blonde grasped his sword again, his eyes growing icy and ferocious, he explained, your enchantments contain hidden codes. My seal can easily find those codes and shatter any enchantment you make. Now, I'm going to ask you again. Where is my own daughter? However, Freed lunged towards the blonde, his sword ready to strike, only to halt once more when an explosion erupted in the town's outer reaches. Chaldea Cathedral, Gray whispered despite the agony his body was experiencing. The blonde reasoned, so someone has engaged the asshole into a fight, as he, too, gazed toward the cathedral before turning back to Freed. Then I'll have to finish quick if I want my turn at pounding that bastard. With his sword laced with wind chakra, Naruto suddenly charged at Freed. A few seconds prior to Naruto and Freed fighting, while Erza, who lived a few blocks from the church, was still looking for her daughter and the jerk who had stolen her, Natsu continued his search a few blocks away from the church, trying to track down Laxus using his scent. "Where are you, Kushina?" Titania thought frantically as her anxiety over her daughter started to overwhelm her. "Erza." When Erza turned around to see who had called her name, she saw Kana, Juvia, and Mirajane running in her direction and stopping to catch their breath when they got to her. "Why are you all in this place?" Erza, relieved to see her friends unharmed and free, asked. "We've come to help you find Laxus and get Kushina Chan back," Kana said after catching her breath, "and to stop this madness before the master's condition worsens." Erza became alarmed at that. "How is the master doing?" Mirajane responded, "I gave the master his medication before we left. His pain was stabilized from what I could see, but he still needs medical attention," drawing a startled look from Erza. Observing her startled expression, Mirajane gave her friend a gentle smile as a sinister aura surrounded her, saying, "I will not let Laxus harm my goddaughter. If he does, he's going to find out why I was feared." "Mira," Erza muttered, giving her a grateful smile, but it vanished as soon as they sensed the magic energy of Mistgun and Laxus rising in response to a loud explosion coming from the cathedral's direction. Kana muttered, "It came from Chaldea Cathedral," and the two S-rank mages nodded. The four of them turned as a huge dust cloud appeared southwest of their position, followed by another explosion. "What might be going on over there?" Kana muttered as she cast a suspicious glance at the cloud. Mirajane gasped in alarm when she noticed another signature. "Juvia feels 4 signatures coming from there. One is Gray." "Samas," said Juvia, suddenly becoming worried for Gray. "Elfman." "Juvia don't recognize other two," informed Juvia, while Erza immediately recognized one of the last 2 unknown signatures, a confident smile adorning her face. With assurances that both of them will be fine, Erza led the way to the cathedral. "How are you aware of that?" When Erza changed suddenly, Kana became worried and frustrated. "Gray and Elfman could be fighting Freed right now. We need to go and help them," Kana said. But the redhead just turned back to them with a self-assured smile. "Since Naruto, Gray, and Elfman are present, I advise you not to worry." Titania was reassured that he won't let any harm fall those two, but her claim was confirmed when she felt her lover's energy spike and then another explosion. When Kana, Juvia, and Mirajane recalled Bixlow's battered form, they simply shuddered. Juvia whispered, "For whoever fights Fishcake, Juvia feels pity," and Kana and Mira nodded. Erza stared at them bewildered for a few seconds before shaking her head and running in the direction of the cathedral. The 5 of them nodded to one another as they rushed into the cathedral, slamming the doors open after realizing that Natsu had arrived simultaneously with them. "Laxus!" Erza and Natsu yelled, only to discover Mistgun and Laxus engaged in combat. "Mommy?" From a distance, Kushina yelled from her cage before Laxus's throne. "Kushina!" Erza exclaimed in relief and concern, but Mistgun was preoccupied with the group and let the Thunder Mage strike him in the face with a lightning bolt. 5. Mistgun! Natsu yelled as he hurried to assist his guildmate, but he and Erza abruptly stopped when they gazed at the mage's now exposed face. "Gerard!" 5. Erza muttered, startled to see her old friend from childhood still alive, drawing attention from the girls and Laxus. "An old acquaintance?" Laxus made fun of him. "Erza?" Mira asked as she went up to her friend. "What the devil? Is Gerard Mistgun?" Natsu exclaimed in shock. As if in embarrassment, the Gerard look-alike turned away from Erza and said, "Erza, I wanted you, at least, not to see this face. I'm not Gerard. I know of him, but he is not me. I apologize. I'll let you handle the rest." After that, Mistgun, Gerard abruptly vanished. Erza was too shocked to notice that Laxus had aimed one of his lightning strikes directly at her, but Juvia pushed Erza aside and took the hit for her, saving him. "Ah!" Juvia screamed in agony. "Juvia?" Erza had crawled onto her other side and kneeled next to her, assisting Kana in helping Juvia sit up, and she had seen the water mage fall to the ground with severe injuries before rushing to her side and shouting. "Why? What were you thinking?" Erza exclaimed, but they were all startled to see that she was grinning with tears in her eyes. Juvia simply desired to make everyone accept her as an actual fairy tale member. Her response was, "Juvia loves you guys," which made Kana and Mira cry and Erza cry in silence. "You're one of us, of course. There was never any question about that," Kana cried out. You're an exceptionally talented fairy tale mage. Juvia whispered, Juvia is glad, and then she passed out. Then the church was filled with icy laughter. Laxus grinned smugly and declared, I would rather kill that phantom girl trash before allowing her to become a member of my guild. As Erza put on her black wing armor and Mirajane changed into her Satan Oversoul, the magic energy of both of them suddenly increased. Natsu glared at the master's grandson with fire encircling his fists. Calmly, the demonic Mirajane said, Laxus, I'm going to make you eat those words. Oh, so the barmaid finally grown a pair of balls to fight, jeered Laxus, ignoring Natsu and glaring directly at Erza. And you must be glad that the father of your brat has come back, he said, mockingly, as Kashina's eyes widened at the mention of her father's return. It amuses me of how all of you believe that with his return, I'll be defeated, he said with a dark grin. Especially when Fried hasn't even begun to use his full power. They all glared at the mage, but when they sensed a sinister surge of power emanating from the location where Naruto was fighting, their eyes, aside from Erza's, widened. Returning to Naruto, Fried, who was severely cut and bleeding, was struggling to stop the blonde's sword attacks, but each time he did, the wind covering the blade managed to nick him, and he growled in frustration as his enchantments were rendered useless because every time he used them, Naruto slapped his seals onto them, breaking the runes and leaving him to battle Naruto with his sword, which was dangerous because Fried had discovered firsthand that the blonde was a very good swordsman after he quickly countered and parried or blocked the majority of his attacks. I have no choice but to use that, Fried thought, grimacing from a shock of rib pain. I seriously underestimated him. The blonde raised an eyebrow at Fried when he abruptly sheathed his sword, but his gaze remained icy and unforgiving. Are you giving up? Fried shook his head when the blonde asked. The dark mage wrote the enchantment for darkness on his chest and replied, No, I realized that in order to beat you, I have to use something forbidden. Yami no Ikricher. The Kyuubi declared, Be on your guard, brat. I sense demonic energy rising within him, as the blonde assumed a protective posture. Darkness. Gray looked at Fried with some fear as he was suddenly engulfed in a pillar of darkness and his magic level increased. Elfman started to stir and moaned, Ugh, what happened? I only recall fighting Fried. As he looked up and saw the one person he believed he would never see again, the giant Strauss said. Naruto. Elfman muttered incredulously, but then his focus shifted to Fried when another burst of magic energy was released, causing it to explode violently and send Gray and Elfman reeling from the backlash as Naruto stood on his ground, staring at the figure that had replaced his opponent. A dark, demonic-like creature with horns emerging from his head and a scale-covered left eye, and made a face. The blonde said, You're one ugly mother. Fucker, and Elfman and Gray both started to perspire. Fried wasn't finished attacking, delivering a double-handed axe strike onto the blonde's back with such force that the ground cracked on impact, followed immediately by a hard kick to the midsection, sending Naruto crashing into a nearby building at high speeds. If the dark mage was offended, he didn't show it, but he did blur out of sight and reappeared in front of Naruto with his right knee buried deep in Naruto's stomach, managing to lift him off his feet as he let go of his blade and gasped for air at the sudden attack. Naruto. Gray and Elfman yelled, barely getting back up on their feet after regaining some of their strength. He can therefore call forth demon energy. The 9 tails in his head praised him, saying, He's very skilled to do that. Who are you on furball with? The blonde in his head snarled as he got up to one knee and wiped a tiny drop of blood from his lip with his thumb, only to hear the Kyuubi snort. Kurama shot back, Don't blame me for your conceit, you reckless fool. Or did you forget that I can read your mind? Naruto ignored his opponent because of his past opponents from recent battles, but he didn't argue back because the fox was correct. You're right, I didn't take him seriously from the start, Naruto acknowledged. Then I suggest you stop playing around, brat. When Naruto noticed Fried approaching from behind, he swiftly made the Kawamari hand signals and replaced him with a nearby boulder, which Fried's punch crushed, allowing Naruto to counter with a powerful right hook to the exposed midsection. However, Naruto's eyes widened in surprise when he realized the scales were as hard as armor. After the blonde crashed into the wall, Fried pounded at him with a left hook to the face, and Naruto muttered, Fuck, as the sound of the pounding flesh reverberated through the building's ruined hallways before abruptly stopping. Fried looked at the blonde in disbelief as Naruto simply blocked one of Fried's powerful blows with one hand, displaying no signs of struggle at all. However, since his head was pointing downward, he was unable to see the look on his face, but slowly, Naruto raised his head, shocking Fried even more as he stared directly into his crimson, slitted eyes as some red energy started to engulf the blonde completely, taking the shape of a hybrid fox with a tail swirling behind him. Naruto's killer intent increased, and he growled, "Now you pissed me off," as his eyes glowed red with energy and pieces of his skin started to tear off his body. Kyuubi warned, "Brat, your body is still too weak to use my power," but the blonde's piercing chakra enhanced roar ignored his warning. Even though their bodies hurt, Gray and Elfman heard the beating Fried was giving Naruto from outside the building and were ready to rush in to help him. However, they stopped when the beatings stopped and a huge wave of killer intent passed over them as a deafening roar erupted from the building, which then exploded as Naruto sent Fried sailing. When Fried crashed a few feet behind them and turned back to the building where Naruto had crashed, Elfman and Gray saw Naruto approaching them while wearing a red cloak that resembled a fox, complete with the outline of the tail and ears. What really chilled them, though, was the color of his eyes, which had changed from the blue color they remembered to crimson slits, with his whisker marks thickening and his nails growing into claws and his teeth turning into fangs. Elfman and Gray were thinking about the same thing. Fried was going to take a serious hit. Fried crawled out of the debris caused by the building that had fallen on him, and Naruto continued to glare at him as he continued to advance towards him. Fried looked at the slightly Kyuubified cloaked blonde with a hint of fear, but that fear was quickly replaced by a glare as he got up and ran towards the blonde at blinding speeds with his fist cocked for a powerful haymaker. Seeing his opponent coming straight at him, Naruto just stood motionless and waited until the last second, when he braked into Fried's defense and delivered a powerful left hook into the stomach, creating a shockwave upon impact, causing Gray and Elfman to over themselves from the debris created by the shockwave. Naruto quickly reacted by retracting his left fist back and delivered a chakra-enhanced punch to Fried's unprotected, gaping face. Fried stumbled back a couple of steps due to the force of the punch and retaliated by delivering a knee strike to the charging blonde's chin, only for Naruto to suddenly halt his charge and easily dodge as he leant back and countered a round shin kick to the midsection, causing Fried to gasp for air for a mere second. Then he tried a second attempt at countering with a backhand fist to the blonde's cheek, only for Naruto unflinchingly to firmly grasp it by the forearm and applied pressure in his grip. The sound of bones being crushed reached the blonde's ears and gave a counter of his own as he twisted Fried's arm back and dug his claws into the flesh as he gripped onto the shoulder with the other hand, kneeing Fried hard in the midsection multiple times as Fried began to cough a little blood with each knee. With the last knee strike, Naruto released his hold on Fried and sent him back across the bridge. The blonde then just made his signature jutsu hand sign, Jutsu no Kage Bunshin. 3 clones swiftly materialized in a cloud of smoke and engaged Fried in combat right away. He's able to make copies of himself, the dark mage thought startlingly as he stood up and realized what Naruto had done, but his astonishment was short-lived as he started to be battered by the clones, even though he had blocked most of their attacks. He then saw an opportunity to eliminate 2 of his clones and he took it, but he was not quick enough to raise his defenses in time to eliminate the final clone. Fried crouched beneath the clone, the Haraishan seal glowing in the clone's palm as he thrust it forward, nailing the dark mage in the midsection and sending him back a couple of feet away as he skidded on the ground. Fried slowly came up to one knee while holding his abdomen, and he turned to glare at the clone, who was rapidly going through a hand of seals, only for his cheeks to swell after he took a deep breath as he completed the final sequence. Sweden. Jutsu no Suiryuden. Utilizing the river's water, the clone formed a massive water dragon and launched it at his astonished adversary before he exhaled. His clone used the river to create a water dragon. Frantically, Fried yelled, "What the hell is he?" Those were his final thoughts before the water dragon struck him, and he screamed in agony from the force of the blow. Naruto vanished in a flash of red before he abruptly reappeared in front of Fried, holding a watermelon-sized spiraling ball in his right hand. As he approached, Fried's eyes widened in terror, and then he heard Naruto say, "Rasengan, this is over." Fried screamed in agony as Naruto's attack went straight into his abdomen. The Rasengan then ground away his armor and reached his skin, sending him skidding before it exploded and broke his demonic enchantment, transforming him back into his normal form as he came to a face-down stop. Back at the cathedral, Erza was grinning as they sensed Naruto's constant power gain, and Laxus's eyes widened as he sensed the power Naruto was letting go of. Erza asserted confidently, "You shouldn't underestimate Naruto, Laxus," before glaring at him with a fierce expression as she readied herself for combat. "Especially now that you have enraged him by taking our daughter hostage." Laxus simply snarled in response to Erza's jest. "I'll just have to see how furious he gets when he sees you getting smashed into the ground," Laxus yelled as he started to power up, his body glimmering with lightning. Unexpectedly, Natsu ran toward Laxus while his fist was blazing. As he hurled a lightning bolt directly at Natsu, Laxus sneered, "I'm sick of your head." On charges, but Natsu swiftly ducked to the right and moved his body in midair to kick the lightning mage in the face with a flaming kick. "No Kagedzum, Karyu," Natsu yelled, but the attack was ineffective because Laxus protected himself with his lightning-covered forearm, shocking Natsu's leg in the process. When Mirajane saw her opportunity, she quickly moved behind Laxus's back and attempted a powerful right. However, Laxus anticipated this and sidestepped to the right, grabbing Mira's arm, dragging her to him, and giving her a hard knee to the stomach, causing Mira to gasp from the sudden lack of air. "You bastard, Laxus!" Kana yelled as she turned her cards red, ready to launch a fire attack at Laxus, but before she could finish her spell, Laxus sent Mirajane crashing into her. Laxus caught a glimpse of Natsu charging at him again, but this time he met him head-on and kicked the Dragon Slayer in the face with a lightning-enhanced kick. "Natsu, uncle!" As she watched him get thrashed by Laxus, who grabbed hold of Natsu's arm and pulled him to land a barrage of blows to the face, Kushina cried out. But Natsu was not one to give up, and he responded with a flame-enhanced fist to the face. The two slugged it out until Laxus had had enough and shocked Natsu by using him as a human club to lift the electrified Dragon Slayer and slam him to the ground after he twisted his body to use Natsu once more, only to slam him into Erza as she came from his side to round kick him in the side. Laxus said, "Come now, don't make this easy for me," as he kicked Natsu in the face of Kana and stomped his lightning-covered foot directly into his back. But while he was distracted by them, he failed to notice a shadow moving stealthily from one of the cathedral's broken windows and making its way as quietly as possible to Kushina's cage. To her surprise, however, the Iron Dragon Slayer merely used his strength to spread the bars apart to create a gap big enough for her to escape. Kushina heard approaching, silent footsteps and turned to see who it was, but she gasped when she saw Gadgil looking down at her with indifference, making her shake a little. "I don't have a tomato all day. Get moving." Before she fled to hide, Gadgil snarled, ignoring the glare directed at him for the remark about the tomato. The Iron Dragon Slayer, who may not care much for people in fairy tale, does care for Juvia because she was the only one who would approach him during their days in Phantom Lord. She was always there for him, and when he asked her why, her response shocked him. He turned his eyes to Laxus and snarled venomously at the sight of Juvia's immobile form. "Because like Juvia, you're alone and being alone hurts." 4. And ever since, he did care for her, despite his refusal to acknowledge it. "You bastard, I'm going to kill you." As he charged at the unexpected Laxus, an enraged Gadgil yelled, "Tetsuryu no Goken." When Laxus turned around after hearing the cries behind him, he was struck hard across the face, sending him flying in the direction of a cathedral pillar. "Are you defending the guild?" As he stumbled to his feet, a shocked Natsu asked. "Destroying it or keeping it safe?" The Fire Dragon Slayer snorted as Gadgil said, "It's my choice." Natsu smiled and said, "I thought there wasn't room for two dragons in the sky," but his brother, who slays dragons, smiled back. "Maybe not, but with all this damn thunder around, the sky isn't fit to fly." When Natsu looked back at a sleepy Laxus, he said, "Damn right it is," adding, "I'm going to settle things with you one of these days." Erza argued, "Settle your differences later," and then she turned back to where Kushina was being held. When she saw that the cage was empty, she became extremely concerned, asking, "Where's my daughter?" Gadgil responded, "She's hiding. I busted her out," which made Erza turn to face him in shock. "We need to attack now while he's still out of it." Refitting her black wing armor to Heaven's Wheel armor, Erza swiftly regained control. "Everybody, give it your all," Between her hands, Mirajane collected energy from the surroundings, then transformed it into a huge, transparent globe and hurled it in Laxus's direction. The extinction of souls. Then, as a seal formed in front of them, Gajeel and Natsu both took deep breaths and threw their heads back. Hoko no Karyu. Yoroko no Tetsuryu. An enormous tornado with jagged metal fragments inside and a massive ball of fire moving in Laxus's direction. The Fountain of Prayer. Kana yelled her attack while setting a card on the ground and conjuring up multiple water beams that slammed into Laxus from all sides. Finally, Erza yelled her attack while brandishing her sword. Saimitama. As she cut in a delta pattern with her sword, she yelled. Each of the 5 attacks struck Laxus squarely in the middle, resulting in a massive explosion as a huge cloud of debris grew in the wake of the impact. Have we gotten him? As he searched through the rubble for Laxus, Natsu inquired. They looked in disbelief as the cloud dispersed and revealed Laxus slightly injured, despite the fact that his coat and shirt were destroyed upon impact, when they heard a dark laugh. Laxus grinned darkly and said, I knew I shouldn't have bothered in trying to bargain with the old fool, as lightning started to dance more violently around his body. I should have relied on this power of mine from the very beginning. What sort of creature is he? In his mind, Gajeel asked, terrified that Laxus had survived the assault nearly unharmed. How? Our attacks should have caused him serious harm. Her body trembled slightly as she imagined a furious Erza. Laxus slowly jerked his head back as he took a deep breath. The old man always told me to shut up about this little secret of mine, but now, the lightning mage said, his teeth turning into fangs like Natsu's and Gajeel's, shocking everyone. Now I can show all of you just how special I truly am, he said. He can slay dragons, Mirajane gasped in surprise. He's playing a bluff, Gajeel, unable to believe what he was witnessing, argued in denial. Not possible. Natsu muttered, no, Raryu. Erza immediately realized what was going to happen and hurried to find Kushina, who was behind a pillar that was too close for them. Kushina will be caught in the blast if Laxus attacks, Titania thought frantically as she ran or flew in the direction of her daughter and landed in front of her, embracing her tightly and using her body as a shield to keep her safe. Mom. Kushina mumbled in fear, but Erza calmed her by gently massaging her back. Mommy is here, so don't worry, baby. Erza heard Laxus yell, I assure you that nothing bad will happen to you. Hoku. The lightning formed in his mouth and exploded in a concentrated, destructive blast, destroying everything in a broad swath in front of him and engulfing everyone as they were flung back in the assault. When the attack had subsided, everyone was lying on the ground, severely wounded and paralyzed from the sheer volume of volts their bodies had been exposed to, leaving them somewhat numb. Kushina, however, was unaffected because Erza had managed to keep her safe. Erza, barely able to open her eyes, squirmed as she attempted to move her hand to reach for her daughter's cheek. Mama, the little girl whispered as she left her mother's arms and knelt next to her, giving her a gentle shake. Erza softly smiled and whispered, see, told you nothing was going to happen to you, hoping to console her daughter, who was now crying. But all of a sudden, a shadow passed over them, and Kushina looked up, gasping in horror, to see Laxus standing above them with a crazy smile on his face. So much for the mighty Erza, Laxus sarcastically said. I suppose I should get my gift ready so I can give it to Uzumaki and watch his face break when he sees you. Erza turned her head slightly and saw Laxus clenching his fist while chanting for his attack and laughing hysterically. Erza willed herself to kneel in front of Kushina and embrace her again, saying, resounding through the air, the roar of thunder, plunge from the heavens and reap destruction. Erza. Natsu muttered as he gazed helplessly at Kana, who was lying next to him, unconscious. Erza. Kushina. Mira gasped as she attempted to stand up and try to stop Laxus, but her attempts were unsuccessful. However, after Kushina lost her hold on the kunai during Laxus's dragon roar, no one paid attention to the untouched palmed kunai that was buried a few feet from them. Boruto Rijingu. Erza and Kushina closed their eyes and waited for impact as a massive bolt of lightning started to descend upon them. Daddy. The kunai then responded to Kushina's cry for her father by glowing brightly as she yelled for him. Freed found Naruto standing directly in front of him, his left hand choking him at the neck while his right hand held another Rasengan. He struggled to even sit up as he clutched his stomach, blood streaming down his face with ragged clothing. This really is a demon's power. I will be murdered. Elfman and Gray watched from a few feet away, hoping that the Naruto they knew was still inside somewhere, rather than the ruthless person they were currently seeing. Raised the dark mage in terror as he saw the swirling sphere coming down straight to his face, only for the Rasengan to be a few inches away from his face. The Rasengan then gradually dispersed with the cloak, restoring Naruto's natural features while he maintained a dejected expression. "What makes us fight, amongst allies?" Naruto asked. "Comrades. It was you who first abandoned your so-called allies," Free returned the glare. Naruto turned to face Gray and Elfman and remarked, "You're right, I did, but they are also your nakama, members of the same guild." "Laxus is the only nakama I have," Freed argued, suppressing his actual feelings. The blonde retorted, "You're lying to yourself, I can see it in your eyes," as he rose to his feet and frowned down at Freed. "Clinging to one person isn't a bad thing. But why are you going to ignore those who are willing to form bonds with you? Individuals are interconnected. You see, it's when people realize how lonely it is, that they start seeking the acceptance of others," said Freed, recalling all of his conversations with different guild members, all of whom showed him kindness and acceptance. The dark mage realized his error and covered his face with his hand, covering the tears that were streaming from his eyes. When he opened his hand, he was shocked to see Naruto's extended hand. Freed extended his hand slowly and took it. While assisting their former adversary in sitting up, Gray approached Naruto and put his hand on his shoulder. The blonde gave him a warm smile, which Naruto returned. When the ice mage said, "Welcome back, asshole," the blonde sage shot back, "Glad to be back, ice stripper," but the big guy embraced her instead. "You returned, Naruto. You really are a man," exclaimed Elfman as he hugged the blonde with all his strength, causing Naruto to wince and grunt in pain as he felt his stab wounds throbbing, something that didn't go unnoticed by the two. "Are you alright?" Without replying, Naruto dropped to one knee and put his hand on his chest. "What the devil, Fox? I believed that after your chakra was cleansed, it shouldn't harm me." As he felt the 7 stab wounds throbbing, Naruto yelled in his head. For a few seconds, the 9 tails remained silent until he heard the beast growl. "Well, brat, it seems that when Madara injected you with his chakra, it didn't only try to corrode you from the inside out, but it also affected my chakra as well," Kurama said. "What the devil? How?" "Due to his chakra being dark or negative, however you want to call, and which quite frankly I don't care, it managed to contaminate mine while I was purging it out of your system, turning a decent portion of my chakra into what it used to be before you fought me for control," stated the 9 tails. "Then, as a last resort, should I switch to Biju mode?" As he felt the pain gradually subside, Naruto asked. "For the time being, brat, yes. Don't worry about me, we still." Naruto lied, saying, "I'm fine, just wounds that are still healing, so as not to worry the two." Then he abruptly stopped when they sensed a strong power source emanating from the cathedral, which made the blonde dreadful because he could sense Erza and probably their daughter there as well. "Erza? Kushina?" thought the blonde desperately as he got up to his feet when he felt the familiar tug from one of the Haraishin kunais. "Hang in there, I'm coming." Gray and Elfman stepped back in case Naruto did something, but to their surprise, the blonde just disappeared out of thin air. They assumed he was going to the cathedral. The blonde's body suddenly started to give a faint glow. Return to the cathedral. While Laxus laughed hysterically at his impending victory, those who were still conscious watched in horror as his attack swiftly continued to descend upon Erza and her daughter. "Erza!" Natsu yelled as the bolt, which was only a few inches from them, made contact, causing a tremor that rocked the entire church and producing a blinding light. Natsu, Gajeel, and Mirajane gasped in horror at what Laxus had done when the light had gone and there was nothing left but a huge crater where Erza and Kushina stood. "Yo! You monster!" With tears streaming down her cheeks and her heart tightening at the memory of failing to protect those she loved once more, Mirajane yelled. Natsu simply pounded the ground in his rage and clenched his eyes shut while sobbing for her friend. "Salamander!" When Natsu heard Gajeel call him, he turned to see him looking shocked and trembling as he pointed startlingly toward the church's deeper section. Mirajane and Natsu were both shocked by what they saw when they turned to see where the Iron Dragon Slayer was pointing. Naruto stood a few feet away from them, his back to them, and he was carrying Kushina and Erza, who were both unharmed. As they waited for the lightning bolt to strike, Erza and Kushina continued to keep their eyes closed, but it never did. Gradually, Erza realized that she was standing up instead of kneeling, and that something had encircled them both in a protective way. Gradually, Erza opened her eyes to discover that she was looking into someone's chest as she clung tightly to her daughter, her arms still encircling her. Erza. Chan, are you two okay? The sound of the voice causes Erza's eyes to enlarge. Soft and affectionate, yet deep and familiar. Erza slowly raised her head to see Naruto's blue eyes and adoring smile staring back at her. You returned. You really came back, Titania muttered as tears started to well up in her eyes and fall down her cheeks. Naruto placed his cheek on her head and gently rubbed it against her hair as he watched the woman he loves turn slightly towards him, holding their daughter in her arms and burying her face on his chest while she sobbed with joy. Shush, don't cry, Erza. Chan, I'm here. Naruto comforted her in a soft whisper. Don't ever abandon me again, you bastard, Erza sobbed, her body trembling with each cry. When she slowly opened her eyes after hearing a strange voice call her mother's name, Kushina saw the man she had seen in photographs comforting her mother. Daddy? In the hopes that it wasn't a dream and that her father wasn't a cruel joke, Kushina squeaked. Naruto heard a small voice call his name, and when he glanced down a little, he saw that Erza had both of his arms securely wrapped around Kushina for protection. With a gentle smile, he gazed lovingly at his daughter. Hello, Kushina. Chan. When the little redhead could take it no more, she started crying and leapt slightly out of Erza's arms to put her little arms around her father's neck and give him a strong hug. Kushina hugged her father tightly and remained silent as she sobbed on his shoulder, bringing tears to his eyes as well as the eyes of the people watching, including Mirajane, Natsu, and Gajeel, though he refused to acknowledge it. Naruto rubbed Erza's back and comforted him, saying, Shush, don't cry, Kushina. Chan, I won't leave you or your mother ever again, I promise. You swear? Kushina softly whispered as she pulled away from his neck. Promise of a lifetime. Then, abruptly, Naruto became solemn as he drew Erza and Kushina nearer to him and embraced himself while Laxus's blow struck his back, making him clench his teeth. Daddy, Naruto. Both of the redheads cried out in alarm. Naruto turned slightly back, his back smoking slightly through a destroyed vest, and looked at Laxus from the corner of his eye. A death glare sent at him as Naruto broke the embrace and let Erza take a few steps back with Kushina still in her arms. You do best to remember that I'm still here, deserter, he taunted Laxus with his lightning-covered fist. Makarov's grandson was about to leap at the blonde when he gasped for air and stumbled a bit, staring at Naruto with wide, disbelieving, and slightly scared eyes. Laxus. The blonde, whose eyes were emotionless, glared dangerously at the artificial dragon slayer as he slowly entered sage mode and aimed all of his killer intent at him. Give up now, and I'll be merciful, he growled. Meanwhile, the amount of power that Naruto was releasing made Natsu, Mirajane, and Gajeel tremble. Naruto has this power, thought the pink-haired dragon slayer as he stared at his friend with wide eyes. Laxus is Su-boned. This man is incredible. This is not going to be a battle between mages, Gajeel thought, looking fearfully at Naruto. There will be a battle between monsters in this. However, Laxus was growing irate that a simple gaze was bringing someone to their knees. He's a nobody, Laxus exclaims, I'm the strongest of them all, as he charges, destroying everything in its path with crackling electricity. Erza held Kushina in her arms as she watched some of the bolts come directly at them, but to their astonishment, Naruto just held out his hand while the lightning bolt brushed against it. However, Naruto remained motionless, his palm smoking. Naruto said softly, Don't worry, I won't let any harm come to the two of you, as he gave the other blonde a fierce look. The energy that surrounded him felt warm and passive to Erza, who then observed him as he started to move in Laxus's direction. Naruto. The blonde stopped suddenly and turned back slightly to Erza, revealing his yellow irises, reddish orange pigmentation around the eyes, and horizontal bar like pupils to her and their daughter. You better not lose, you hear me? Yes, Naruto. Give him a kick. Natsu's shout caught Naruto's attention as he witnessed the fire dragon slayer drop to one knee from his position while closing one eye. As Naruto refocused his attention on Laxus, he simply grinned and became serious. I'll demonstrate. The strongest man is me. Laxus yelled angrily as he charged at the blonde with his lightning-covered fist, ready to deliver a right hand, and Naruto charged at Laxus with his own fist cocked back to deliver a punch of his own. Everyone watched as the two slowly approached each other and threw their fists. Naruto was nicked as a small cut appeared on his cheek with a small, visible trail of blood sliding down his cheek, but his smile didn't last long because he felt a powerful blow to his cheek that sent him sailing to the side, leaving a trail of blood from his mouth, and Naruto stood back in a crouching position with his arms still extended. A sizzling sound caused him to widen his eyes in realization before he was engulfed in the explosion and sent further across the cathedral. Laxus crashed into some of the church's pillars until he finally crashed into the wall, causing a large portion of the wall to fall on top of him. He didn't stay down long because he quickly shot up from under the debris, spitting out blood as he fell onto his hands, glaring hatefully at Naruto, only to discover some kunais hailed his way and embedded themselves onto the rocks next to him with tags wrapped around the handle. As he watched Laxus slowly rise to his hands and knees and glare at Naruto, Naruto said, "Get up, Laxus. Your own personal hell is just commencing," with a controlled rage in his eyes. Carla and Levi were about to leave the guild after she had finished explaining Wendy's abilities to the other guild members who had remained when they noticed an elderly woman with grayish-pink hair entering. She immediately asked where Makarev was. Not wanting to provoke Polyursica, Levi led her into the infirmary, where Wendy attempted to heal the old master to the point of exhaustion and collapsed. While Polyursica examined Makarov, Levi and Carla hurried over to the young girl and laid her down on one of the beds. She then informed Levi that Wendy had only just been able to control the master's condition and that he could still die at any time. At Polyursica's request, Levi, appalled by the news, quickly leaves the guild with Carla in tow to locate Laxus. Chaldea Cathedral. Makarov's grandson doubled over in agony, growled in rage, and lashed out at his opponent with a lightning-enhanced punch. Naruto blocked it with his chakra-enhanced hand, but it didn't do much because he still felt the bolts surging through his hand down his arm, numbing it a little before he redirected the punch away from him and countered by quickly forming a Rasengan and ramming it into the artificial Dragon Slayer's stomach, sending him spiraling backward while some blood sprayed out of his mouth. He managed to land on his feet a couple of feet away, giving him enough time to charge his magic and launch a massive lightning bolt at the blonde. The blonde waited until the bolt was within range of Naruto, who was feeling his hand again thanks to the Kyuubi. Naruto, dodge it. Natsu, who was still having trouble standing up from the beating he had taken from Laxus's roar, yelled, using Gadgil as a crutch and vice versa. As he called out his technique, Naruto ignored Natsu's yell and started spinning quickly in place. Kaden. As Naruto defended himself with a chakra dome, chakra suddenly emerged from his pores, colliding with Laxus's attack to produce an explosion that gave the cathedral a slight shake. "Daddy!" Kushina yelled as she attempted to escape her mother's embrace. "Please, don't worry." As she clutched her daughter and observed a cloud of debris hovering where her beloved was standing, Erza thought anxiously. After Laxus's roar, Kana lost consciousness and started to regain it slowly. She moaned and gripped her left side as she tried to sit, but someone's hands helped her sit up, and when she looked over her shoulder, she saw Mira kneeling behind her with a gentle smile. "I got you, Kana. Chan," Mirajane said, gently putting Kana's arm over her shoulder and assisting her in standing up. As she looked around the cathedral, she noticed that the red-headed pair was standing next to Natsu and Gadgil, who were staring at the cathedral's center with concern while Laxus had a triumphant, savage grin. However, what caught her attention was that Laxus was actually hurt, as he had cuts and bruises on his upper body and was bleeding from his mouth. "What happened, Mira? Why does Laxus appear so battered?" Kana asked as she winced from the sharp pain in her ribs that was making it difficult for her to breathe. Myra's smile vanished as a worried expression came over her face, and she turned to face the debris cloud that continued to linger without their blonde friend in sight. Kana's eyes widened as Natsu responded, "Naruto is kicking Laxus's ass," without taking his gaze away from the fight as he leaned against Gadgil for support. "Is Ni-San here?" The others sighed with relief when they saw Naruto unharmed, glaring down on Laxus as the latter gritted his teeth. Kana thought in disbelief as she too turned her sights back to the battlefield as the cloud started to spread and revealed a shadowy figure standing tall. "How can he surpass me in everything I do?" Gadgil gazed at Naruto in mild fear as the master's grandson raged. This man is exceptional. The blonde's eyes widened slightly as he said, that bastard isn't even breathing hard, and the stab wounds that cat told us about aren't slowing him down one bit. Laxus was just playing with us, but he can't get the upper hand on that brat's father. The Iron Dragon Slayer swallowed on a parched throat and thought, he really is a monster. What's wrong, deserter? If this is all you are capable of, then what good is it to be a warrior of war? Let's see you block Judgment Uzumaki. Taunted Laxus as he stood up, causing Naruto to narrow his glare dangerously at him as Laxus's grin turned vicious as his power started to rise dramatically. Naruto ignored the others' shocked and terrified expressions as he merely braced himself for any impending attack. The assault that dealt Jose a single blow of death. Remembering the aftermath of that attack, Gadgil gasped in terror. That attack targets everyone the caster sees as an enemy. When Naruto heard that, his eyes widened in alarm. Erza yelled, Laxus, stop, but Laxus wisely listened as he prepared to launch his assault. Carla and Levi were seen entering the church when one of the cathedral's doors abruptly opened. Everyone in the cathedral turned to watch Levi as he yelled, Stop, Laxus. You idiot, why have you come here? The Iron Dragon Slayer thought. It's the master. He's on death's doors, Laxus, she said, her voice starting to crack slightly as tears started to well up in her eyes. They were deeply affected by the news of the Makarov's death. The elderly man's going to pass away. Natsu mumbled, his eyes wide. I'm dying, Chan. As Erza started crying, Kushina cried out while being cradled by her mother. Kana and Mirajane both felt their bodies going numb from shock at the news. So, please, could you please stop this? Simply go see him, in an attempt to get Laxus to change his mind, Levi begged. Then, gradually, Laxus's laughter grew louder until it reached a full-fledged roar, and he then turned to face Levi and the other members of her guild with a sinister smile. Unaware that Naruto's eyes were obscured by his bangs as his fist clenched to the point of drawing blood, Laxus declared, Well, that suits me just great, shocking everyone with his brutality. Looks like my chances of becoming master went up again. Why you? Erza, Kana, and Mirajane glared at the artificial dragon slayer, disgusted by his behavior, while Gadgil and Natsu growled vilely. Hee. Die fairy tale. As he raised his magic once more to unleash fairy's law, Laxus yelled, I'll rebuild you from the ground up. A guild that is unbeatable and will make everyone shudder in terror. As his magic reaches its peak, I'll create the best guild ever. When they saw the madman poised to attack, everyone tensed, but when Laxus's head jerked back and a deep gash appeared across his scarred eye, clutching it with one hand while using the other for support, everyone's eyes widened in shock, and the spell was broken. What occurred? As she and Mirajane watched in confusion as Laxus gripped his injured face with his hand, blood streaming through his fingers, Kana asked. Mira responded, I'm lost just like you are, and then she turned to face the Dragon Slayer pair. Did you guys attack Laxus? Both of them gave a headshake. Naruto. When they heard Erza's voice, they turned to face the person she had mentioned. They saw that he was bladed, with his right arm raised high in the air and his hand making a mocking blade motion. However, they also felt a slight breeze blowing off of him as his hair moved softly. What frightened them the most, though, was that his eyes were still hidden by his bangs. Naruto? After putting Kushina on her feet, Erza asked again and walked slowly toward her lover, only to be met with silence as the blonde silently made his signature sign for Kage Bunshin, causing plumes of smoke to appear as 6 copies of the blonde appeared next to him, all of them standing or kneeling down and staring down at Laxus with emotionless, unreadable looks in their faces while he glared back with hatred. The red-headed man recoiled at the icy tone of the blonde's voice as he said, Erza, take Kushina with you and leave the cathedral. Everyone else will be carried by my clones, who will then follow you back to the guild. No, I will remain, Titania said. I won't leave you fighting Laxus alone. But Laxus started laughing uncontrollably as he got to his feet, his hand still covering his face. This is just too funny, Laxus said. The Hall of Thunder is still active, and if by some miracle you maggots defeat me, I still win in the end. As he withdrew his hand and gave everyone a maniacal grin. You fuckers seem to be forgetting something, he said. gesturing to the magical screen that was displayed in front of his mock throne. His laughter reverberated throughout the cathedral until the blonde suddenly cut it short when he appeared in front of the lightning mage in a matter of seconds and struck his face with a powerful fist, sending him crashing into a church pillar. Naruto muttered, "You talk too much," before turning to face Erza and the others. "I'll take care of Laxus. The rest of you take care of the lacrimas," he said, looking to one of his clones. "You grab Kushina and take her back to the guild." The clone gave a silent nod and swiftly shunshin behind his daughter, putting a gentle arm around her petite body. After securing her in his arm, he made a single-handed gesture and vanished in a cloud of smoke. "Like hell, we're going to let you fight that jerk by yourself." With Gadgil standing behind him, Natsu, who was at last able to stand alone, exclaimed, "We'll take him down together." But Naruto just turned and gave Natsu a stern look. "Natsu, Laxus is not a threat here," the pink-haired dragon slayer winced as the blonde exclaimed. "The town will be destroyed if the lacrimas floating outside burst." However, Natsu was not one to back down as quickly as he did when he got in Naruto's face, engaging in a bullfight in which they attempted to push each other with their foreheads. "You're an idiot. Our goal is to assist you so that you don't worsen your injuries and hurt yourself more," Natsu yelled back, making the blonde tense up a bit before turning away and attempting to avoid Erza's gaze. "Injuries?" Before turning to face Naruto, Titania asked in a low voice, "What wounds is he referring to, Naruto?" Erza glared at him and demanded, but then her eyes widened as a memory of Naruto's sword stab wound against the opponent wearing the mask flashed through her mind. Erza's guess was confirmed when the Iron Dragon Slayer replied, "Some stabs that he suffered from when he was found by the Sky Dragon Slayer," drawing a glare from Naruto. According to her, those wounds were fatal and haven't healed completely. Erza gave Naruto a suspicious look when he stated, "My wounds are healed," but everyone turned abruptly to face the debris pile located far inside the cathedral when they noticed Laxus slowly emerging from it without noticing the Gajil's eyes on Naruto. The slight twitch of his eyes and the slightly accelerated breathing pattern as he suppressed the pain and the perspiration that started to form on his face made Gadgil think, he may hide it well, but those wounds are affecting him. He's lying, Gadgil thought. The blonde remarked, "Go, time's wasting, and I'll take care of him." Erza in particular appeared to want to protest, but she understood that there were more pressing issues to attend to. "He's right, the more we stall, the more time we waste in stopping the Hall of Thunder," Erza said, causing the others to stare at her in confusion. Erza and Naruto were left alone inside the cathedral as Natsu, Mirajane, and the others reluctantly left to go to various locations in order to remove as many of the lacrimas as possible after realizing she was correct. Naruto. The blonde just swiveled to look at her. Erza tried to summon her most menacing glare, but it was a failure because Naruto could see the worry in her eyes. "You better not die on me, you hear me," she ordered. In an attempt to calm her anxiety, Naruto turned to face her, closed the distance between them, and gave her a gentle kiss before pulling away and gently petting her cheek. "Don't worry, Erza-chan," said Naruto. "Nothing is going to stop me from coming back to you." Erza remained silent as she gazed at the blonde with concern, but she soon regained her resolve and leapt to give him a quick kiss on the lips before rushing out of the cathedral. "You're crazy if you think I'll let you go so easily," Laxus yelled as he launched a powerful lightning strike in Naruto's direction, attempting to destroy both him and Erza in a single blow. However, he had overlooked the blonde's clones, as two of them unexpectedly materialized in front of the blast while undergoing a series of hand seals. Doden. Doryuheki. Both clones spit out mud from their mouths, forming a massive wall of hard earthen material that successfully blocked Laxu's attack but caused the wall to explode due to its powerful power. Laxus gritted his teeth as he watched the debris surround his opponent until it slowly started to disperse, with Naruto's head slightly turned and his hard, cold gaze glaring straight at him as he watched the blonde turn completely, facing away from him while the other clones blurred at his side. "Deserter. Why send them away? Afraid that they'll see how weak you really are after I defeat you and throw your broken form at Erza's feet?" Laxus asked with a self-assured smile. Laxus was caught off guard by the abrupt change in his opponent's eyes, but he was unable to respond as Naruto's fist landed on his stomach before he could counterattack. Naruto just stared at his blonde counterpart without responding to his taunting. He merely closed his eyes and smirked, but it vanished as soon as he opened them again and ran quickly towards Laxus. What on earth is happening? Thought Laxus frantically before he slowly looked down at the blonde, confirming his suspicion. Their eyes? Have they changed? He tried to counter with a hammer fist down to the blonde's face, but he felt his attack coming to a halt as he looked above him and saw another clone with the same eyes grabbing onto his arm. Crimson eyes with black slits glared, but he wasn't going to let that intimidate him. The original Naruto abruptly moved away from Laxus, but the blonde managed to look ahead of him in time to take a vicious kick to the face that sent him flying backward. He was unaware that two more clones were suddenly approaching him, and one of them stopped him with a knee strike to the back, while the other clone kneed Laxus in the stomach, bending over with the force of the blow. However, it wasn't enough, as the two clones continued to attack him with punches, elbows, and knee strikes until one of them delivered an uppercut that lifted Laxus off his feet onto a descending clone, slamming him into the ground as he crashed. But Laxus had no intention of falling that quickly, as he channeled his anger into his magic, making the clones cautiously leap back as they saw the master's grandson stand up again. "You jerk. I'll ruin you." The ground exploded beneath him as another replica leapt at him, grabbing onto his face to deliver a thunderous knee to the stomach. Laxus coughed blood onto his opponent's hand before he was throwing to the left, where another replica appeared with a Rasengan formed on his hand. "I'm shocked to see 5 replicas of my opponent standing in front of me," he exclaimed. "Oh no, you won't?" Believing he had caught the original as the blonde's eyes widened in surprise, Laxus thought angrily as he managed to turn himself in midair, shocking his opponent as he flashed lightning in front of him and delivered a lightning-covered punch through the blonde. "Told you you were weaker than me," boasted Laxus smugly. "Go to hell now." However, Laxus's smile vanished as he saw the blonde smirk weakly. "What's so incredibly hilarious?" Laxus demanded, but all he received in response was boom. And then the clone exploded in front of Laxus's eyes as realization set in, and he watched as it crashed into one of the cathedral's few remaining pillars. He cursed and shakily got to his feet, his right arm rendered useless from taking the full blast of the explosion. He was so careless that he didn't notice Naruto and the rest of his clones jumping at him from all sides and stomping him hard before 3 blonde blurs leapt and left 2 clones to grab hold of him as he struggled to escape. Daitopa, Futon, Karyu Enden, Kaden. His attention was drawn to the clones' cries as he saw the 2 surviving replicas inhale deeply before one of them released a stream of fire that resembled a dragon and the other a powerful gust of wind to feed the fire, making the attack twice as powerful. Laxus fought even harder to escape after realizing the danger was approaching, but the clone's grip on him was impenetrable. Makarov's grandson thought, "ICA, cannot lose like this," but his fear quickly turned to rage. "I will not submit to this bastard. I will not fall short against a nameless son of a bitch." Laxus stood up with a thunderous roar, startling his captors by tossing them in the direction of the approaching flames and watching as the clones burst before they could scream. Without any delay, Laxus flashed again behind the gullible clones as they waited for the debris to subside, but they soon sensed someone behind them and attempted to turn around and defend themselves, but it was too late as Laxus impaled both of them with a lightning make shit halberd, causing the final 2 clones to detonating, leaving Laxus alone while he looked for his opponent. "Deserter, where are you?" Laxus yelled, his anger still stoking him. On the other hand, Naruto was hiding behind one of the fallen pillars, leaning against it and clinging to his chest in agony as he coughed up blood and perspired heavily. "You fool. I warned you against combining my chakra with the nature chakra. But no," yelled the 9 tails in his head. "Given that your idiot just awoke from a 5-month coma, you had to get mad and use my tainted chakra in addition to your rage." "I understand my predicament, Fox," the blonde countered, mentally rising shakily, "but I have to do everything in my power to stop Laxus, even if it means straining my body beyond its current limits." He noticed that the lightning lacrimas were still floating around the town when he looked out the window. Why are they taking so long? Before his danger senses took over and he threw a Haraishin Kunai to dodge a lightning strike, flashing a few feet away from Laxus, Naruto muttered. "There you are," sneered Laxus with a cocky smile as Naruto scowled at his rival. Erza, meanwhile, placed herself at a specific spot after leaving the cathedral and used her magic to call forth as many swords as she could, but because of her prior battle with Laxus, She was rapidly exhausting herself, as she fell to one knee and supported herself with her hands. 199. Swords. Still not enough to take them out. Huff huff. At once, Erza sighed as she looked up at the lacrimas and struggled to catch her breath. Erza's body was severely injured, but she forced herself to stand. Titania muttered, "Come on." Huff huff. Just a couple more and Mira. Huff huff. And everyone else can take care of the rest, as she came to. Hey, all of you, are you all able to hear me? Erza recognizes the voice and her eyes enlarge. This is an urgent situation. Check out the sky. Warren. Erza mumbled, "Get up and stop lying around people. If you are fighting, take a break." At this point, everyone in Fairy Tale was gazing up at the sky and at last recognizing the floating lacrimas. Now, everyone, pay attention. We must use all of our magic to remove those objects that are floating in the sky. You must not leave a single one. The town is about to be attacked by Laxus's spell. At that, everyone's eyes enlarge. Time is of the essence. Just do it, everyone. How did Warren find out about that? Erza asked. Erza? Is that you? Erza closed her eyes and smiled slightly as she heard Gray's voice. I see, you informed him. How are the other girls doing? An additional guild member asked. We're all fine, just Mira, Juvia, Erza and I are a little banged up from fighting Laxus, replied Kana. What? Everyone yelled. Laxus has been assaulted, then? Macau asked. Erza replied, no, Naruto is fighting him right now. They all said the same thing when they heard about Naruto's return and his battle with the master's grandson, if the news of the girls confronting Laxus hadn't already shocked them. What? Natsu joined the argument, shouting that he had first dibs against the blonde, as those who had known him before he left the guild started arguing over how they were going to kick his ass for leaving in the first place. HMPH, what a bunch of squabbling monkeys. They stopped arguing when they heard a deep, rumbling voice and wondered whose it was. Naruto had a thick mark from hearing the members of the group argue over who would beat him while he and Laxus were trading blows back at the cathedral. You guys can battle it out later. I'll kick all of your asses if you don't lift those lacrimas from the sky, yelled Naruto as he ducked and kicked Laxus in the chin, then followed him as he put his arms around him correctly before spinning quickly. First Lotus, slamming Laxus's head into the ground while Naruto leapt away. Seeing through Naruto's eyes, Kurama remarked, no wonder you fit right in, you're like the rest of those insane flesh bags, as Laxus stood up, spat blood, charged himself with lightning, and ran in Naruto's direction. Close off your trap before I enter and kick your ass too. The blonde in his head yelled as he launched himself above his opponent using Laxus's extended arm, twisting in midair and kicking Laxus in the back with an axe. I challenge you to enter and engage in some fleshy behavior. He slammed his head against the bars and challenged the Nine Tails. Do you wish to have a piece of me? In response, Naruto grabbed one of Laxus's legs and swung him into one of the pillars like a baseball bat before slamming him to the ground again. Erza simply smacked her head into her hand, while everyone else felt perspiration form at the back of their heads as they listened to the argument between the jailer and its container. Erza muttered, he still acts like an idiot, but her lips were smiling affectionately. You heard him? Shall we demolish these things? Gray yelled, forcing Erza to focus on the current task. All right. You guys focus on the southern side, and I'll take care of the 200 on the north. Erza gave the order. All of the mages were amazed before being struck by lightning as a result of the link magic, and the Hall of Thunder was destroyed in an instant, leaving everyone on the ground from the charge and momentarily celebrating their minor victory. To be honest, you people can be so careless, Erza said, gazing up at the sky. Erza thought, it's all up to you now, Naruto.kun, and she closed her eyes. Laxus returned to the cathedral and gazed at the screen indicating that the Hall of Thunder was not functioning properly. How can you, as a member who doesn't attempt to be a part of that group, hope to be master, Laxus? This guild just proved to you that change isn't needed, that they are strong in their own right, Naruto said. As his magic encircled him, Laxus remained silent for a few minutes before letting out a primal roar and glaring at the blonde shinobi while dancing wildly. By force. The master's grandson roared, rearing his head back and taking a deep breath, concentrating all of his magic into a single blow. After closing his eyes and calling forth the Kyuubi's chakra to envelop him in the first stage cloak, Naruto merely said, "I see," before leaping back and putting both of his hands together in front of him before charging for a Bijudama. In order to complete this battle in a single attack, both of their powers continued to increase. By this point, the majority of the fairy tale members had returned to the guild, where Polyursika was tending to their wounds while Erza and Kushina stood at the guild's entrance, anticipating the blonde's safe arrival. Kushina clung to her mother's dress and whispered, "Mommy, I'm worried," but Erza just stroked her daughter's hair as she turned to face her. Erza reassured her, "Don't worry, Ku-chan," before she looked toward the cathedral. "Your father promised us that he'll return to us and he never breaks his promises. He really is a man." Erza and Kushina both turned around to see Gray, Elfman, and Mirajane, all bandaged, coming toward them. "He's still not here?" asked Mira, but was disappointed when Erza gave a headshake. Then all of a sudden they sensed the power of Naruto and Laxus grow to unthinkable heights. The amount of power the two blondes were giving Gray made him tremble a little. "Looks like the battle is about to reach its final stage," he said. Mirajane walked next to Erza, putting her hand on the redhead's shoulder in an attempt to calm her anxiety, but to her astonishment, Erza just turned to face her with a genuine smile before turning back toward the cathedral. "Erza." Mira glanced at her friend with the red hair and thought, "You haven't smiled like that since Kushina was born." When they returned to the cathedral, both combatants had finished their attacks. "No, Raryu." "Hoku," yelled Laxus as he attacked Naruto with a magic seal that materialized in front of him. "I'm going to beat you," Laxus thought frantically. As Naruto pushed his hands forward into the sphere in front of him, his eyes abruptly opened. Bijudama. As the two attacks fought for control, they drew closer and closer until they collided with a tremendous boom that broke the cathedral's remaining intact windows and caused the walls to crack from the extreme pressure of the assaults. "After this, I'll be the one standing," the master's grandson cried out. Without saying anything, Naruto just pushed forward and started to subtly drown out Laxus's dragon roar. Laxus then tried to use more magic in his attack, but it seemed ineffective because the sphere kept drowning out his roar. "What the heck is going on?" Laxus cried out. "You fight for power, Laxus, and that's not what fairy tale is about," the blonde calmly clarified, keeping a ferocious stare on his opponent. "In fairy tale, everyone fights for one another and teams up to overcome bigger challenges." He pushed once more, causing the Bijudama to further drown out Laxus's roar. "You are your grandfather's grandson, despite your best efforts to deny it or your reluctance to acknowledge it." Laxus's eyes widened at Naruto's exclamation. "That fossil doesn't matter to me at all." "Screw him." In denial, the lightning mage yelled, "I'm not his grandson. I am an individual." "Bullshit. You may pretend that you don't care, but your eyes tell me otherwise," Naruto retorted. "Despite your best efforts to conceal it, you are worried about your grandfather and feel bad about his current situation." "Stop talking." Laxus yelled in denial. Naruto muttered, "If defeating will make you see reason, then so be it," as he changed into a horse stance, holding his other hand close to him and making the single-handed signal, "This battle is over." His words caused the Bijudama to shrink in size before exploding in a huge explosion that destroyed the cathedral's ceiling and engulfed everything inside in a flash of light. The explosion caused a pillar of light to shoot upward. The sudden light show took the entire town by surprise, but they pretended it was something the fairy tale mages were planning. The guild knew what was going on, though, because they all hurried outside as soon as they saw the cathedral's light of power shoot out. Chaldea Cathedral is the source. Those two are attempting to murder one another. To be in Laxus's position right now would be awful. Erza, however, ignored the muttering that was going on because she was concerned about her lover's safety. However, a comforting hand was placed on her shoulder, and when she turned around, Mirajane was smiling softly and consoling her. "Just believe in him, Erza," Mira said. For a few minutes, Erza just gazed at her friend before wiping away the tears that threatened to spill and turning back to Mira with a smile of her own. Titania turned back to the dying light and said, "You're right," until it vanished entirely. The cathedral looked like a war zone once more after the explosion of the attacks had subsided. There was rubble all over the place. Pieces of the walls were missing because the setting sun was penetrating the holes in the walls, and pieces of the ceiling were still falling as they hit the ground with a loud thump. There was movement beneath the debris as someone attempted to dig himself out, and a hand emerged and started to pull himself out as a mop of spiky blonde hair surfaced from underneath, coughing as he attempted to breathe air into his lungs while spitting out some blood. A big pile of bricks was piled up on top of someone in the far left corner. Kurama growled at the blonde's stubbornness. "I told you not exert yourself, brat," but Naruto just smiled as he pulled himself out and sat on his knees, grimacing as he rested his right arm upon his body aching from the pain of the sudden battles he had to endure. The blonde, still wearing a grin, muttered, "I know, Fox, but at least the fight was over." When he heard the Kyuubi snort at his response, he shook his head and leaned against the wall, looking around until he saw Laxus's motionless form. He sighed with relief as he saw the blonde's chest move slightly up and down. He raised his hand and made a hand sign, and a puff of smoke appeared beside him as a clone appeared. The clone gave a half salute as he leapt alongside the downed blonde and lifted him over his shoulders before puffing out in a cloud of smoke alongside Makarov's grandson. "Grab Laxus and take him to the nearest hospital," the blonde ordered. "For me now. To go home," Naruto muttered, grinning, as he started to leave the cathedral, holding onto his stomach with his right arm. The path was illuminated by the fading light as he left the church and made his way to Fairy Tail. Back at the guild, the sun had set and the moon and stars had replaced it, so that only a few members remained to accompany Erza and Kushina as they waited for Naruto to return. As the sun continued to set, more and more members returned to the guild until Kana, Happy, and Mirajane were left alone with Erza and Kushina, both of whom remained motionless until Kushina slowly fell asleep and was picked up by Kana, who was sleeping soundly in her arms while she watched Erza gaze out into the streets with her arms crossed under her bust while the guild's lights hardly lit the gates. Turning toward the entrance, Kana said, "I'm going to take Kushina to bed," and entered the guild. Mirajane approached Erza as she watched Kana bring Kushina inside, feeling the cool night breeze brush against her sensitive skin. The barmaid suggested, "Erza, let's go inside, you need to rest," but Erza only turned slightly in her direction. Erza reassured her that, "I'm all right, Mirajane," but Mira could see that Erza was struggling to stay awake because of her ongoing injuries and the weariness of fighting. "I want to wait a little longer." However, Erza's vision began to blur as soon as she said that, and she shook her head slightly to get it to clear. A distraught Titania uttered, "Maybe you're right, I need to rest," as Mira took her hand and pushed her inside the guild, wrapping her arm around Erza's shoulders. Erza, FF. X's Oran's theme plays. Erza and Mira blinked as they turned back to Happy, who was pointing to the streets of Magnolia. He was more of a shadowy figure approaching the guild, but they were unable to identify him because of the darkness. Once he was within reach of the entrance, the guild's light gradually started to illuminate him, which made Erza cry a little. An injured blonde with spiked hair and 3 whisker lines on his cheeks ascends the guild's stairs to the last one and stands a few paces from the entrance, his right arm still around his stomach, but he manages to smile when he sees the woman he loves. Naruto said, "Hello, Erza," before his body failed him and he fell to his knees, collapsing further onto the ground. However, as Erza rushed and fell to her knees to break his fall, he felt a pair of arms encircling his head and shoulders. She cried, placing his head tenderly on her chest and holding him tightly as if his life depended on it. Naruto willed his arms around Erza's waist, embracing her with all his strength as he started to cry as well. As he sobbed, Naruto whispered, "I've returned to you, Erza." Erza helped Naruto sit up straight on his knees so she could cup his face with both hands and give him a passionate kiss. Even after the kiss ended and they just sat there, their foreheads touching and tears still streaming down their faces, Naruto's arms never left her waist. "Welcome home, Naruto.kun," Erza said affectionately. Theme of Orin ends. Mira merely observed from a distance as she calmly smiled while wiping away the tears that fell down her cheeks. With Erza's assistance, Naruto was able to stand up after his body refused to listen. He put an arm around Erza's shoulders and used the other to hold him by the waist, while Erza's red head placed a gentle hand on his abdomen. Erza gasped when she saw her hand covered in blood and her eyes widened a little when she felt it getting wet. "You must see Polyursika right now," Erza gave the order. Naruto tried to reassure her, saying, "I'm okay, Erza, just some small bleeding," but she gave him a deadly glare that made him shudder. Erza. Gosh. She's become more frightening. As he watched Erza give him a triumphant smile, the blonde with a terrified expression thought. Mira merely chuckled at the pair. As she peered out the door, Kana said, "Mira, why are you both still doing out?" But her words were cut short when she noticed her brother's figure. Ni-san, Kana exclaimed as she left. After hearing his name, Naruto glanced over Erza's shoulder and saw Kana standing there, about to cry herself. "Hey Kana-chan," Naruto said with a warm grin. She couldn't contain her tears any longer, so she threw her arms wide open and threw her face into his chest, burying it there. She didn't notice that Naruto grimaced because the hug was making his injuries worse, but he held it while he embraced her with his free hand. Unwilling to be self-centered, Erza lets go of Naruto and backs off a few paces while her beloved puts his chin on top of her head and embraces her with both arms. His soothing words, there, Kana-chan, rocked the blonde back and forth. With a guilty expression on his face, Naruto reached for Kana's tear-stained cheek and gently wiped away one of the tears as she looked up at him with her eyes still watering. Naruto muttered, "Pardon me for being a fool," but to his surprise, Kana simply grinned and gave him a tighter hug. The card user responded, "You've been forgiven long ago, big brother," as she pulled away and gave Erza her spot back by his side, and welcome home. Then, abruptly, Kana covered her mouth with her hands and turned to face the entrance. "Everyone, Naruto has returned home," Kana yelled. As soon as she finished speaking, Naruto saw the people he had met 3 years prior rush outside the guild. He was a little anxious because he wasn't sure how the others would react, but all of his worries vanished when he felt Erza's hand clasp his own and give it a comforting squeeze. He turned to face her and saw the same tender eyes she had when they confessed their love to one another 3 years prior. Erza mouthed, "Everything will be alright." Naruto smiled appreciatively at her before they turned to face the horde of guild members who had come comically close to him and surrounded him, putting him in headlocks or slapping his back while ruffling his hair. "Naruto, attack me!" With a broad smile on his face, Natsu yelled as he swung at the blonde, his fist engulfed in flames. With a sly smile on his face, Naruto watched as Natsu came toward him. When Natsu was within arm's reach, he grabbed hold of his arm and swung him around, sending him sailing over the guild into the backyard. Before any splashing could be heard, Natsu screamed his head off. Everyone chuckled at Natsu's misfortune, and they all laughed even harder when he returned, pouting and sulking in soaking clothes as he walked between Elfman and the Iron Dragon Slayer, a smile spreading across his face. As the Fire Dragon Slayer declared, "I'll kick your ass one of these days, Naruto." The blonde replied, "I'm ready for whenever you are, Natsu," with a broad smile on his face. "Naruto, you are such a man," Elfman yelled. Gray stood there in his underwear, mockingly saying, "You have a better chance of snuffing yourself out than beating Naruto Candlestick." "You say you're a frost flake?" Natsu yelled. Kana casually said, "Gray your clothes," with Lucis red background. However, her words went unnoticed as Natsu and Gray began fighting, and soon the entire guild was fighting with smiles on their faces. "Mama," Kushina's voice caused everyone to halt their little celebration, and they all turned to face the entrance, where Briska, accompanied by Azlik, was carrying a groggy little red head while rubbing her eyes to get them used to the new light. Erza approached Briska and embraced her daughter tenderly. "What's up, mother?" asked a completely bewildered Kushina, but she was startled to see that everyone had gathered outside, obstructing her view of Magnolia's streets. Erza merely grinned as she turned to face her relatives and observed them all taking side steps to the left or right. Once everyone had stepped aside, Kushina let out a gasp as she saw her father stand a couple of feet away from her, not noticing her feet touching the ground as Erza placed her down and said. Mother watched her daughter slowly take her first steps till little by little, she sprinted towards her father with tears rolling down her cheeks. "Daddy!" With her arms extended, Kushina yelled. When his daughter jumped into his arms and tackled him, Naruto grunted as he held her firmly to his body and managed to stay on his knees, watching her run at him while he dropped to his knees with his arms spread wide. Kushina openly cried as she clutched onto her father, crying as she felt him hug her tightly as if his life depended on it, softly placing on the back of her head as she felt him place his cheek on top of her head, crying with her as she heard him sob softly. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Erza went to her small family and knelt before Naruto, putting her arms around her blonde lover and Kushina between them, The three of them sobbed quietly as they were at last reunited. Mira, Elfman, and Kana, as well as Gray, Juvia, Lucy, Natsu, and Happy with Wendy, and, surprisingly, Carla and Gadgil with Levi by his side, either had tears in their eyes or were sniffling, trying not to cry in front of everyone else. As they watched the smallest member of their large family, their long-lost father, finally be reunited, and their sister finally be with the man she loves, the rest of the members present had tears in their eyes because they were happy that a small family was at last reunited. Their little one. Naruto comforted him as he and Erza stood up, his cheek still resting on top of his daughter's head while he gently stroked her hair. Kushina gazed up at her father with joyful, hopeful eyes. "Daddy, you swear that you won't ever abandon Mama and me again?" she begged Erza, who was now gazing at the blonde. Naruto simply grinned sweetly while gazing lovingly into the eyes of both of his loves. "I swear to Kushina, a promise of a lifetime," Naruto said, leaning slightly to plant a kiss on his daughter's skin. Natsu, with tears in his eyes, grabbed a piece of clothing and blew his nose loudly because he could take it no more. "What the devil?" After he had finally located all of his clothes, Gray yelled, "Blow your nose somewhere else, flame brain," and gave Natsu a fierce look before punching him in the face. "That walking snow cone of yours is going to cost you," Natsu yelled as he hurled himself at the ice mage, and everyone began fighting again, like a domino effect. Naruto just gazed up at the sky and saw the stars shining brightly, but he had only one thought as he thanked his parents and turned to face his beloved, grinning, the two of them holding each other with an arm around the shoulder, Naruto, or around the waist, Erza, Kushina still in their arms. As everyone carried on fighting, he declared, "I'm finally home," leaning forward to plant a tender kiss on Erza's lips as the sounds of cheering and laughter filled Magnolia's streets as they rejoiced over the return of their long-lost relative. As the entire ordeal came to an end, morning had reached the Guild of Fairy Tale and informed the townspeople that the festival's parade would be held in a day. The guild was not ready, because its members were still caring for their wounds and determining who could participate in the festival, primarily to ensure that the master was safe and that Naruto's wounds were healed because he was with Makarev in the infirmary. The majority of the guild members were wrapped in bandages as they assembled in the main hall, waiting for Erza to emerge. They knew she had been there since last night with Naruto and Polyursika, who had left the guild early in the morning after caring for his wounds all night. Suddenly, the doorknob was turned, and the door slowly opened, revealing the equipped mage as she walked with a slight smile on her face, addressing all the members gathered. "How is the master doing?" Lucy inquired. "Yes, Erza. How is the elderly man doing?" Natsu was followed, his left shoulder and torso wrapped in bandages, and a band-aid patch was applied to his left cheek. "How about Naruto? Have his injuries gotten worse?" This time, with bandages covering her left arm and torso, Kana asked. Erza simply raised her hand to indicate that everyone should remain silent. The redhead declared, "The master is out of danger, thanks to Polyursika and Wendy," which caused the others to sigh with relief. However, his years are undoubtedly growing, and if excessive stress is placed on him, his condition could deteriorate once more. "I hope that everyone remembers that." Gray leaned back and said, "Hey, the old man's too stubborn to listen to reason. And what about Naruto? How is he doing?" Everyone turned to look at Erza again when the blonde's name was mentioned. The condition of Naruto. His wounds wouldn't heal due to the corruptive energy that still lingered in his system, harming him further when Polyursika used her healing magic on him, but thanks to his tenant, the corruptive energy was purged out of his system and slowly the bleeding stopped, his wounds closing little by little, but he should be up and running sometime around tomorrow, Erza said, a little dejected, which made the others anxious. "Naruto is a very obstinate person who never stays down for long," Natsu said. "He really is a man," Elfman yelled, and his sister gave a slight smile and shook her head. Erza, giving Gray and Natsu a death glare, declared, "But he still needs a lot of rest because his body hasn't fully recovered since he came out of his coma. So no challenging him to fights, do I make myself clear?" As they wrapped their arms around themselves and stared fearfully at Erza, the two mages leapt at each other. Stuttering, L. Loud and CL. Clear Erza. Gray Natsu also stammered, Erza, which still startled Lucy because she wasn't accustomed to it. Natsu is behaving like happy once more. Then, without realizing what was happening behind the door, the mages started talking about what they were going to do with the festival. Naruto sat on his bed in the infirmary, his daughter sleeping soundly beside him, and he smiled as he watched her snore softly as she drew nearer to him, stroking her cheek as he gently brushed away the hair that covered her face and observing that she didn't mind the bandages covering his body all the way down to his left shoulder. Without disturbing her, Naruto leaned down to kiss her forehead and said, "But you will remember your mother and I, and every day you will know how much we love you." "I was an orphan since I was born," he said softly, still petting his daughter's cheek. "I never knew a father's or mother's love until recently, but most importantly, I didn't get a chance for memories, good nor bad. You'll be a great father, Naruto." When Naruto turned to face the voice's origin, he saw Master Makarov lying on his own bed across the room before he sat up and met the blonde's eyes directly. "Thanks, old man," the blonde said before becoming a little serious. "Now what will happen to Laxus?" Makarov sighed with exhaustion and closed his eyes, appearing vulnerable for the first time as his advancing years became apparent. He opened his eyes and Naruto could see the sadness in them. "But as his grandfather, it's not easy for me for what I'm about to do," he said, adding, "He violated the very foundations that Fairy Tail was built upon. That is something that I cannot forgive." Despite his decision to remain silent, Naruto was unprepared for the master's subsequent declaration. Makarov shocked the blonde by saying, "After the festival is over, I'm going to resign as master," and his eyes widened. "Resign again? Old man, why?" Naruto asked or demanded. "As his grandfather, I am responsible for his actions," the elderly man said, closing his eyes once more. "I could have prevented him from going down the same path years ago if I had given him more attention." Naruto remained silent while listening to the old master, remembering the time he felt responsible for letting him lead Sasuke down the wrong path. Within Naruto's mind, Kurama stated, "But Laxus isn't Sasuke," which caused the blonde to nod his head. "An elderly man." The master looked at the blonde in confusion as he said, "If you're going to do what I think then you shouldn't resign as master. I could see the regret in your grandson's eyes during the last moments of my battle against him, and with you resigning as master, it would seem more punishable to him knowing that he was responsible for you forsaking your position as master." Makarov remained silent during Naruto's argument before he fixed the blonde's eyes with a serious expression on his face. The master stated solemnly, "Naruto, I want you to become Fairy Tail's fourth master," which caused the eyes of both Naruto and Kurama to enlarge in Naruto's mind. Are you no longer in your senile state?" The blonde, doing his best not to wake his daughter, nearly yelled. "You're the only person I know that I can trust this guild to," said Makarov. "I cannot ask anyone else due to someone like Erza or Gray being still young and despite having the experience. They lack the requirements to be master of this guild." He sighed. "However, you, on the other hand, have the qualities to lead, to inspire and have the experience beyond your years to be a great leader." And then he reopened his eyes. "I know you feel that you're unworthy due to what you did 3 years ago, but don't let that weight down you, for you know very well that everyone will support you if you were to become master." Looking down at his daughter, unaware of what was happening, Naruto remained silent as he considered what Makarov had told him. However, as he turned back to face the master, he made his decision regarding the master's request. With a slight smile on his face, Naruto looked down at Kushina once more and said, "I'm honored that you would want me to become the next master, but, at the moment, my only focus is being a father and being a part of my little girl's life." Makarov appeared taken aback by the blonde's request denial, but he grinned with pride upon hearing the blonde's justification. Makarov observed the young man in front of him and thought, "You would make a great master one day, Naruto." "However, there's something I want from you, master," Naruto said abruptly, raising the master's eyebrow in interest. "Boy, what would that be?" the old master inquired. When Naruto said, "I'm going to ask Erza to marry me," the old man's eyes widened, "and I want your blessing." Makarov simply sat there hunched over, then laughed aloud before settling down a little and grinning broadly at Naruto. The old man's eyes became gravely serious as he said, "Boy, even though I'm honored that you asked me for that, you don't need my blessing. But if you were hurt Erza again, I will personally make sure you are brought down," Makarov said. "Difficult." Naruto just gave the elderly man a scowl. Makarov smiled once more as Naruto asserted, "I would rather die first than watch Erza cry because of me again." The old master sensed his grandson coming toward the guild and said, "Good, now, go outside and wait with the rest of them goofs while I talk to my grandson." Naruto nodded and turned to face his daughter, giving her a gentle prod that made her yawn sweetly as she opened her eyes gradually. "Dad?" Kushina gently rubbed the sleepiness from her eyes and said. As he walked towards the door and turned to face the old master with his hand on the knob, Naruto gently said, "Come on darling, let's go see mommy," scooping his daughter into his arms and allowing Kushina to use his shoulder as a pillow. Kushina wrapped her tiny arms around his neck and they nodded their heads before the blonde opened the door and left the infirmary. Everyone was having a good time outside the infirmary when they heard heavy footsteps coming from the guild entrance. Everyone watched in shock as Laxus himself entered the guild, infuriating those who were angry with the master's grandson for starting a fight among the guild members. "Why in the world are you here? After what you did, you're displaying some nerves here." "You're absolutely correct. After what you did, you don't feel guilty about wanting to see the master." Laxus simply stared at everyone else, emotionless and devoid of his characteristic haughty grin. "Everyone. That's sufficient." Everyone stopped yelling and turned back to the infirmary to see Naruto and Kushina walking out together. She was wide awake and a little scared when she saw Laxus in his arms, holding an expressionless expression as he and Kushina stared at each other. Naruto then looked for Erza and, when he found her, motioned for her to get Kushina. Erza approached the blonde silently and gently scooped their daughter into her protective arms while standing behind Naruto, giving Laxus a slight glare, the memory of what Laxus had done at the cathedral still vividly fresh in her mind. Jet started to say, but had to hold his breath when Naruto gave him one of his glares. The blonde then turned back to face Laxus. Both participants started to move in the direction of one another until they were nearly face to face, maintaining eye contact the entire time. Laxus's eyes twitched as he started to glare at Naruto, but then they both felt a slight rise in magic energy and turned their heads to the right, watching as the main characters, including Mira and Elfman, changed into their takeover forms with their arms, Gray with ice magic around his hands, and Azlik and Briska with their gun magic ready to shoot, ready to attack Laxus if he made the first move. Then they turned to the left and saw Erza with swords in hand, with Kushina hiding behind Wendy, both of them trembling a little. Next to Erza were Natsu, who had flames dancing around his fists, Gadgil, who had his arms formed into iron clubs, and, surprisingly, Lucy, who was holding a whip and was accompanied by Loke. They slowly turned their heads to each other, neither of them saying a word until Naruto sidestepped to the side. The blonde said, "The old man is waiting for you," drawing astonished glances from everyone else. He pointed to the door and said, "The infirmary is over there." Laxus, wearing a startled expression himself, passed the other blonde on his way to the door and grabbed the knob. "You know Laxus, you and I are fortunate people," said Naruto out of the blue, causing Laxus to turn back and look at Naruto over his shoulder. "Right now, we are surrounded by folks that love, trust and protect one another like any family would. Protect each other from people like you and I." Naruto turns around looking directly into Laxus's eyes. "I can tell that even though some may have forgiven me, they hold resentment towards me for I did to Erza, because even though she's the strictest, they love her nonetheless because to them, she is their sister and like any other family. They don't want to see their sister sad or crying or see the man they consider a father and grandfather hurt," says the blonde as he looked around the guild, looking into the eyes of each member, seeing the looks of surprise in their eyes as he spoke before his eyes landed on Erza and Kushina before looking at Laxus once more. "I don't know about you Laxus, but to me, that is the strength of fairy tale. That's what makes this place home for everyone here and I'm going to do whatever it takes to earn their forgiveness," he finishes, looking straight at Erza with soft eyes. Laxus remained silent for a few seconds before lowering his head and stealthily entering the room, leaving Naruto and the rest of Fairy Tail alone as they watched the door close without observing Mikao approaching the blonde and grabbing her attention by placing a hand on her shoulder. Mikao said, "Sometimes, you're really stupid you know that," raising the blonde's eyebrow before he felt an arm snatch at his neck. "I second that," Wakaba concurred. Naruto appeared lost until he heard faint footsteps, then turned to face Mirajane, who was smiling softly as she approached him. "You don't have to do anything to earn our forgiveness Naruto-kun, because we forgave you long ago," Mirajane replied. Then Gray and Natsu showed up beside her, "Yay, it sucked that you left us with," said Natsu bluntly, and Gray gave him a blow to the head. "But we understood why you did it and did our best to take care of Erza and Kushina till you returned home," Gray said, disregarding the scowl from Natsu as he tended to the lump on the back of his head. Naruto simply gazed at each of them in astonishment. Erza equipped her swords and gazed at the blonde with tender eyes. "It's true that a family loves and protects one another, Naruto-kun," she said. "But you forgot one thing. A family is also willing to forgive those they love dearly." Naruto bowed his head and smiled softly, unable to think of anything to say about it. "Thank you everyone. Let's avoid getting too emotional now," Wakaba cried out. "The festival is still a concern." The others applauded and resumed their work, while Naruto just watched until he sensed Erza urging him to approach, whispering something in his ear, which caused his eyes to enlarge and his arms to suddenly encircle her. Erza just encircled her lover's neck with her arms and turned back to face the bar where Mira-Jane was getting Kushina a drink. "Mira, we'll be right back, so keep an eye on Kushina," yelled Erza, leaving a bewildered Kushina in their wake as she and Naruto disappeared in a cloud of smoke without waiting for a response. "Where are Mommy and Daddy now, Auntie Mira?" the little redhead asked. Although Mira-Jane had a suspicion about Erza's exact plans, she was unable to inform Kushina of them. Mira remarked, "They went to catch up Kushi-chan," which made Kushina even more perplexed and made Mira laugh at the young girl's expression. Warning. Lemon alert. A cloud of smoke suddenly arose inside Erza's dorm, revealing Erza long since she had cast off her armor, Naruto still holding her by the waist, and Erza never letting go of her lover's neck, their foreheads touching as their breathing tickled each other's skin, neither of them speaking as they held each other. Softly whispering, "I missed you, Erza," Naruto drew his queen nearer to him and laid his head on top of hers, feeling her tighten the embrace as she laid her head on the blonde's chest. Erza returned the whisper, "I missed you too, Naruto-kun," and then she looked up to meet his eyes. "Now stop talking and give me a kiss," she said. Neither of them argued as Naruto leaned down and kissed her, Erza's arms leaving the blonde's waist as they moved up to the back of his head, passing her fingers through his soft, golden locks as she deepened the kiss. Both of them letting out soft moans as Naruto's hands started moving around Erza's back through her blouse, slowly finding themselves lifting it up as they went underneath her blouse, sending shivers down her spine as she started to feel her legs trembling and involuntarily guiding the two of them backwards until they fell backwards, or frontwards in Naruto's case, as they landed on the plush mattress that was Erza's bed. The love they shared was as evident to both of them as the sky itself when their eyes met again. "Make love to me, Naruto," Erza muttered. Naruto's eyes widened slightly before they softened and once again claimed Erza's lips, letting Erza's hands wander over his torso, slowly unbuttoning the shirt he was given in the infirmary, letting it hang languidly after the last button was unbuttoned. He didn't stop the kiss while Erza helped him remove the shirt, but he did so when she felt her slowly pushing to the side, making him lay on his back with Erza straddling him, his hands moving on their own as they traced her smooth legs, slowly lifting up her skirt as he drew closer and closer to her waist. Without a moment's hesitation, Naruto reached for her skirt's zipper and unzipped it, loosening her dress as it slowly started to slide off her slim waist. Erza pinned Naruto as she now claimed his lips once more, making her skirt slide off completely off of her, revealing her gorgeous behind covered by a tight black, laced panty. When Erza unbuttoned his pants and unloosened his belt, then tugged at them to pull them down, Naruto helped her. He wiggled around as his pants came off until she managed to take them off and throw them over her head. Naruto just lay there as he watched Titania unbutton her own blouse and throw it to the side, revealing her massive bust being held by a color-matching lace bra. Naruto was about to deepen the kiss again, but Titania pulled away at the last minute, leaving a bewildered blonde to have his confusion addressed. With her hands trailing up to his chest, tracing the last stab wounds, Erza looked down as she started to trace the bandages around his torso, tracing each spot where Madara had stabbed him. Then, leaning down, she planted gentle kisses on the blonde's bare collarbone, sending shivers with each tap from her soft lips. Unaware that Naruto had unhooked her bra and slid off her shoulders on top of Naruto's abdomen, Erza continued to plant kisses on him until she claimed his lips once more. The blonde slowly wrapped his arms around his red-headed love, reaching behind her to the strap of her bra. Erza lifted one hand at a time, completely freeing herself as Naruto threw away the bra. Unexpectedly, Naruto grabbed Erza and turned on the bed, pinning his red-haired queen again. The kiss grew more intense as Naruto's hand traced Erza's left side, moving down her stomach and past her waistline, barely lifting her black panty line to let his hand in. Titania rocked her hips a little harder during the kiss, moaning softly as she felt her lover's hand reach inside her panties, spreading her legs slightly to give him more access to her womanhood. He then started to massage her clit, flicking it with his middle finger, and Erza let out a louder moan in his mouth. Erza turned her head to the side, her eyes closed as she clung to her sheets, and Naruto broke the kiss as he started to slowly follow her jawline with his kisses down her neck. As she felt herself getting hotter and hotter, Erza groaned, "Naruto," especially when she felt her lover's member growing as it rubbed against her thigh. "Naruto, stop teasing," Erza moaned as she felt her clit becoming more delicate as her femininity became moistened as Naruto repeatedly kissed and licked her right nipple while the blonde's free hand massaged her left breast. Erza took a deep breath as she arched her head back, her eyes wide open at the sudden pleasure coursing through her body, overloading her senses as she remembered the last time two of them made love. She sighed in disapproval when she no longer felt Naruto's finger caressing her, but she gasped in surprise when she felt him spread her legs a little wider to kneel between them, slowly pulling down her wet panties as he lifted Erza to pull them down. After they were off, Naruto threw them aside before climbing on top of Erza, allowing her to reach for his briefs to pull them down without hurry, her need for him growing inside her like a raging fire. When they were completely nude, they looked into each other's eyes as Erza spread her legs and put her arms around her lover. She felt Naruto's arm slide beneath her, holding her tenderly while he used his other arm to support her and stroke her cheek. Neither of them spoke as Naruto positioned the tip of his cock at her entrance. The heat emanating from Erza's moist vagina slightly confused his senses, but he was still able to control his urges despite Erza's attempts to push him inside her by rocking her hips against the blonde's dick, causing it to grind between her lips. Erza used one hand to hold onto the sheets as the taunting got a bit too much for her, but Naruto took her hand in his own, staring into his beloved's eyes and slowly entering her body, causing Erza to gasp softly as he was filled again after 3 years on the night Kushina was conceived. Erza groaned with pleasure as she felt the rest of Naruto's member slide deeply inside her, and she tipped her head back when she felt his cock sheathed halfway inside her. "My God!" Erza gasped softly and tightened her hold on her lover's hand, but Naruto seemed unfazed by her firm hold. When Erza had recovered her breath, they looked into each other's eyes once more, never letting go once Naruto started to slowly thrust inside her, causing Titania to let out soft moans as her lover continued thrusting inside her. The pace increased gradually as Erza's moans became louder and louder, but Naruto silenced her when he claimed her lips again, devouring them hungrily as Erza returned the gesture with rigor and Naruto quickened the pace more and more, causing Erza to moan louder during the kiss, knowing that she was getting close to climax when she felt her pussy tightening. At the point of climax, Erza grabbed onto the blonde and bit his shoulder as she came all over his member, trembling at the sheer rush of pleasure her body experienced. Once she calmed down a little, she abruptly pushed Naruto off of her onto his back and pinned him while using his shoulders for support. Erza reclaimed his lips with such fervor that Naruto never felt his member slide inside his red-haired lover again or her move her hips back and forth more quickly. Her nails dug into his as Naruto tightened his grip on her waist, and the two continued to make love while grunts and moans of pain reverberated throughout the silent, dark room. Erza broke off the kiss by tilting back, and she let out a loud gasp when she felt Naruto's cock hit a sensitive spot inside her when he rocked his hips against hers. She then rocked her hips even faster to meet his, satisfying their lust as she again felt the walls of her pussy tighten around Naruto's dick, making him grunt even louder at the feel of ecstasy. Despite being absorbed by the bandages, Naruto grunted, sweat streaming down his brow and covering his body. "Erza, I'm about to come," he said. Erza exclaimed, "Come inside me, love," as she felt herself on the verge of passing out, and then she screamed loudly with pleasure as she had another orgasm. Ah! When Naruto realized he could no longer contain it, he threw his load deep inside Erza, filling her up as her body trembled from her own orgasm and she reveled in the sensation of her love's seed covering her womb until her body fell into her lover's arms, who gladly caught her as he wrapped his arms around her and hugged her close to his body, both of them gasping for air as they lay there, clutching onto each other while staring at each other with love-stricken eyes. Erza said softly, "I'm glad to have you back in my life, Naruto-kun," while using her lover's chest as a pillow. With a slightly tighter hug, Naruto whispered back, "You have no idea how much I missed you, Erza. Every night before I went to sleep, I would wonder if you ever thought of me, if I still lingered in your heart, or that you had moved on and found someone else." Erza merely touched his cheek, instantly removing all of the pain he was experiencing. "I promised you I wouldn't leave, didn't I? And it was a promise of a lifetime," he assured Titania, kissing his bandaged chest, which is where the heart is, and saying, "I promised you that I would be here, waiting for you." With a gentle smile on his lips, Naruto simply gazed at her in awe. The blonde kissed Erza's forehead and swore, "I love you, Erza, and I promise never to leave you again." "Good," Erza said, smirking slightly, before a tender smile spread across her lips. "And I love you too, Naruto-kun." In each other's arms, the two of them lay there staring at each other before slowly falling asleep with happy smiles on their faces. They were finally able to sleep soundly as the loneliness that had been gnawing at the backs of their hearts was finally satisfied. Later that day, when the Fantasia Festival was in full swing, Magnolia Town residents were applauding and taking in the parade that Fairy Tail had planned. As Kana used her magic to guide them through the air, the first float featured cards floating around, glowing in magic, surrounded by hearts. Mikao and Wakaba were also there, using their magic in the background, as Mikao and Wakaba combined their fire and fire magic to create a combination choreography that mixed and exploded into hearts before being pierced by a makeshift arrow, which caused the heart to explode into fireworks. After that, there was a fruit-themed float with dancers ringing around a fruit-dressed droid, Jet, Max, and Alzak, followed by a heart-themed float with Biska, Lucy, and Levi in short dresses and cheerleader-style fans waving. Elfman in full beast mode was right behind him, parading in a frightful manner with a flower on top and waving at everyone he passed. As the flower on top of the makeshift tower starts to glow, his sister Mirajane appears, grinning broadly and waving at everyone before using her transformation magic to shapeshift into a giant snake, frightening away the majority of her fanatics and smashing the float along with Elfman. Then came Gray and Juvia, who were dressed as a blue king and queen and had an ice castle. They used their magic to pretend to dance in a ball beneath the iced ring while standing directly behind them on their own float, with the guild's name prominently displayed on top of the ring. After Mira, it was Erza's float, dressed in something she called her demonstration armor, which was basically a white and red dress with knight markings on it. A white breastplate, white and yellow gauntlets, and allowed her to be capable to spin various swords around her in a circle. Then without notice, the crowd got a special treat when they saw Erza's float beginning to shapeshift. An astral form of a giant fox with 9 tails appeared, with all 9 tips of its tails nearing its mouth, wide open as it revealed Erza still dancing. Behind her, Naruto appeared with swords in hand, covered in his Kyuubi sage mode with swords in hands. Erza used her magic to levitate her swords higher up, surrounding a giant Rasengan, unknowingly sort of resembling one of Naruto's Rasen Shuriken. Then Erza equipped her outfit to one of those Arabic belly dancing outfits, with 2 long curved swords in each hand, her long hair fiery hair put into 4 long ponytails as the two began to play sword fighting, dancing around as they playfully clashed their swords with smiles on their faces, shocking everyone as Naruto suddenly stole a kiss from Erza, causing her to freeze up a little bit before giving a playful smirk of their own, resuming their dance. Then came Master Makarov's float, in which he was dressed in green pants, a yellow shirt with purple sleeves, a pink tie, red gloves, a long yellow tail, a red hat with pointy yellow ears, and what appeared to be a large red hat. He was dancing around with a smile on his face, and Kushina was imitating him while wearing a scaled-down version of his attire. As he walked with happy sitting the little green creatures that were pulling the mobile torches, Natsu was finally at the back of the parade, with crimson flames flickering behind him. Natsu looked up at the sky and threw a few fireballs into the darkness, allowing them to explode like fireworks, which made everyone cheer even louder. "This is Fantasia. What a parade, it's the Miss Fairy Tale contest girls. So adorable, oh, they're fairies. What is that, too? It's an ice castle. Water is splattering everywhere. Look over there, Titania is here. Look at those blades. Look, Erza transformed his float into a gigantic fox. What a stunning demonstration of Titania's swords and that magic sphere. A few years ago, wasn't that blonde in Fairy Tail? The one called the Maelstrom of Fairy Tail, you know? Yes. I believe I recall him. My god, Titania just got kissed by that blonde guy. I would have thought she'd have stabbed him by now. Clearly not. The master is here, it's the master. Look, the master is dancing with Erza's child. Titania's daughter is adorable in that ensemble. What sort of attire is that? It does suit them both. Makarov abruptly stopped dancing, his face adorning with a triumphant and solemn expression. He raised his hand to the sky, pointing one finger up and his thumb to the side before twisting his arm around so the back of his hand was visible. Kashina followed suit, landing on her Chan's shoulders, surprising Laxus, who was watching the parade from behind the crowds. However, his eyes widened even more as he saw all the parade participants smirking, grinning, and smiling as they all followed the master's example. All but two. Erza and Naruto stood side by side, and Laxus watched as Naruto put his left arm around Erza's waist and looked directly at him because Naruto could sense people. Both of them held their expressions until they smiled or grinned and lifted their own hands into the air, which made Laxus lose control of his emotions as tears started to fall from his eyes and he felt regret for what he had done, but he still grinned. Laxus rolled his eyes and muttered, "Gramps, Naruto, two of you were right. Fairy Tail isn't just a guild. It's a way of life, of freedom, and of family," he said, closing his eyes as he turned to face the alley and then back to Naruto. "I'll leave them in your care, Naruto," he said. Laxus then quietly departed as the procession continued. As Laxus departed, Naruto stood by Erza's side and wished him well before turning to face Erza and determining that this would be the ideal moment. "Erza," Naruto said to get her attention, "I lost my home, my people, and my loved ones on my birthday 3 years ago. I was blinded by rage and pain that I let leave them," he said, closing his eyes. "To the point that I missed what was important to me," he said, opening them and looking straight into hers. "More important than my dream to become Hokage, and that was you," he said, pausing as he collected his thoughts without ever being interrupted by Erza. "But, also, 3 years ago, I came with a decision that would have changed my life forever, a change that would have given me the one thing I desired in my entire life, and that was having a family with you, had I not left." Erza's eyes widened at this. "Is he?" With her heart thumping in her chest, Erza asked herself in her head. Then, as he held onto her hand and watched Naruto drop to one knee while staring into her eyes and expressing all of his feelings, her eyes widened in surprise and shock. His love, his desire, his insecurities, and his fears. As Naruto reached into one of his pockets and took out a small box, he said, "Erza, you have brought me much happiness since we met, even now when I felt that I wasn't worthy of it, but you showed me otherwise." Erza gasped and started to cry a little when she saw the ring inside the box. "Not only that, but you have given me much more when you after telling me about our daughter, and now there's only thing I want to ask you to make our family complete," he said, her eyes now welled with joy. "Erza Scarlet, will you marry me?" Unable to contain herself any longer, she fell to her knees and drew him into a kiss, ignoring the applause of the town's residents and other guild members because, for the moment, they were the center of the world. Erza broke the kiss and grinned broadly as she looked into Naruto's eyes. "Yes, I'll marry you." The members of Fairy Tail were clapping and cheering with tears in their eyes, overpowering the cheering, but Naruto grinned widely as he took the ring and gently slid it on her finger. He then kissed her. As Kashina patted his back and used a tissue to wipe her eyes, Naruto broke the kiss and they swiftly turned back towards the master, who was laughing and sobbing onto his forearm. "An elderly man. Get married to us." Sniffling, the elderly master nodded his head while a humorous stream of tears and mucus ran down his cheeks. Then he shook his head and, in an instant, he was dressed as the Fairy Tail master, his face wearing a solemn expression as he spoke to the town and his kids. The master said, "My children and beloved people of Magnolia, today we are gathered here tonight to unite these two young loves in holy matrimony," as he watched Erza and Naruto hold hands and gaze into each other's eyes. "Erza Scarlet, do you take Naruto Uzumaki as your husband through sickness and health till death do you apart?" Erza said, "I do," without hesitation. Makarov turned to face the blonde and nodded his head while suppressing his tears. Naruto Uzumaki, do you keep Erza Scarlet as your wife through good times and bad, or do you part ways with her until the end of time? I do, Naruto confidently answered. If there's anyone who opposes this unity, speak now or forever hold your peace. Nobody spoke. With his hands behind his back, Makarov said, very well. As master, I am glad the two of you found happiness after the trials the two of you endured and wish you the best, but above all else, I wish you two all the happiness in the world, he said, lifting his arms into the air and grinning broadly. And now, you can kiss the bride now that I've pronounced you husband and wife. The entire town erupted in cheers as they celebrated the newlyweds, and Naruto didn't need to repeat himself when he leaned forward and planted a kiss on his wife. As a result, they celebrated the union and the Fantasia festival began again with much greater vigor. As the evening wore on and the procession came to a close, Naruto couldn't help but smile as Erza sank back into his chest and grinned at him over her shoulder. To their surprise, Kushina leapt on her father's shoulders and clung to his hair. The three of them gazed up at the sky, watching the stars shine brightly as Naruto and Erza anticipated what lay ahead, facing it as a family.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.